What's up, Pete?
What's up?
I'll be right back.
Laricky looked like about a 6'6" giant standing next to D and Thomas. Laricky is a big dude, though. Hey, what's going on, Barrett?
What's up, man?
Hey guys, welcome to the Real Fisherman Show.
Thank you. Thank you. Wes talked me into coming on and getting on this mess.
Oh, man.
Wes brings you on and then dips as soon as the show starts.
I was trying to get Warren's phone. He said he's having trouble with internet at his house, and his phone does not support Chrome. It won't let him in. So
Hmm.
sorry
Okay.
about that. But anyway, yeah, Barrett, this is Peter Malick. Peter
What's
really
up,
took
buddy?
me a lot in the saltwater world. That's how we met. Well, actually, we met on Facebook, but I went fishing with him last year, saltwater fishing.
Mistake. See, I made him spend a couple thousand now.
Yeah, I know. And of course, I guess you know Joe. Well, you know them, I guess, from watching the show, but
Oh,
you
yeah.
know who they are.
Oh yeah.
So,
Promise not to get drunk on this episode.
No
I'm not
guarantee.
gonna make that promise, but
I am drinking Evan Williams, bottled in bond. Drunk on this episode.
No
I'm not
guarantee.
gonna make that promise. But
Still sipping on this, you know.
The Woodford. Oh man, that's good stuff. I remember years ago, I bought a bottle of Rebel Yell. It's like the cheapest bourbon that you can buy. It's like $12 a fifth. And me and a friend of mine went to Lake Hickory striper fishing, and we were going up to the dam. And I brought my kayak behind my John boat, and I let him stay on my John boat, and I wanted to go kayak fishing. So we go up there, and on our way up there, I got this little pint of Rebel Yell, so I'm drinking on it. It's the roughest stuff. I ain't got no chaser. And I take a swig, and it's killing me to get it down. And my buddy's like, here, chase it with this. And he had a bottle of Woodford Reserve. It's the first time I'd ever seen it. And he handed it to me, and I tried it, and it was so good compared to that Rebel Yell. I could literally chase the Rebel Yell with the Woodford Reserve. It's that delicious.
ain't that nasty ass shit Scott gave Pete?
There's Warren.
Warren made it.
When we got off the phone, it let me.
Oh, did it let you get in when you got off?
Yeah,
All right, good deal.
Is that a Lake Hartwell striper behind you there, Warren?
actually, both of them are. Both of them caught in tournaments, but it was a long time ago.
That's good stripers. You think there's one like that in there now?
Probably not as many as they used to be.
Do you think the water quality's got anything to do with the fishery down there not being as good as it used to be?
Well, the water quality is the cause of the big kill that we had. Lake Hartwell, to my knowledge, had never experienced one like that. I actually was on the lake when it happened. We were fishing a tournament, and the fish just started popping up all around us. Went from seeing 2 or 3 pop up, and I thought at that time it was people trolling artificial bait and pulling up the fish from 35 foot, dragging them with the lead core and then releasing them, get some mortality like that. But then all of a sudden, there's 200 come popping up around my boat, swimming in circles, and by the end of the tournament, there were thousands of them.
Wow.
What happened then? Yeah, what happened then with the water quality? The lake had been down so long, and we had all that rain that came in this time of year, and basically filled the lake up because of. It was down 15, 16 feet. It had come up. I think the worst it was down was 18, but anytime you have a big rain, it's going to wash in vegetation, animals, worms, critters. Those things sink to the bottom of the lake. They're gonna decay. Their decay burns up the oxygen. And that particular year, because so much washed in, the thermocline that we normally would see where the fish would be safe by just being below it, the layer with no oxygen actually superseded the thermocline. So it basically took their habitat away. It was sickening. By the Channel 7 News in Spartanburg, South Carolina, called me and asked me if I'd take them out on the lake. And I asked Mike Griswold, he already had his boat down there. I asked him, I said, hey, if we meet you down there, could you take us out? And he agreed to do it. And it was just sickening. There wasn't 5 foot of bank anywhere on the lake that didn't have dead stripers laying right up against the bank.
How big were they, Warren? Do you remember the sizes roughly?
Most of them were in the 5 to 9 pound range. I think those were the fish that weren't quite as deep. But I don't know if you ever noticed that if you ever lost a tank of bait, 20% of your bait come to the surface, but the majority of it sink to the bottom.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's what I was going to say.
Stripers, yeah. I think most of those big stripers sank to the bottom. So we were seeing the fish that were in the upper layer. And I mean, it was just terrible. I was so sickened from it because I was afraid that even my grandchildren wouldn't. Well, of course, I didn't have any grandchildren at the time, but I was hoping to have some. My daughter had just gotten married, and I was afraid that I wouldn't be able to take them out to enjoy good fishery.
Now, how long ago? What year was that, Warren?
You know, if I'd had a little bit more notice, I could have written some notes down, but I'm going to say it was 2011, 2012 timeframe.
How big would those fish be now? Those 10-pound fish, how would they be?
Well, a lot of those fish would be gone. Most of those fish would be gone by now, but those that would still be in the lake would be in the 40-pound range. But it was those 5-pounders those 3, 5, 6-pounders that would have been our upper 20s and 30-pound fish today.
Yeah.
That's
Most of
what
those,
it was missing.
you said 5 to 9 pounds. Those are adult. That's adult fish.
Yeah.
Now, Warren, I see on here, Clinton, Maine said 2017. Was there a fish kill in 2017?
There was a smaller fish kill in 2017. I'm talking about the big fish kill that happened when our lake levels were down so far.
That was right around the same time Lake Norman had the big striper kill, around 2013, I think it was.
Yeah, Lake Norman had 2 back-to-back kills, or I say back-to-back, a couple years apart. The first one was in 06, I believe, and no, 08 maybe, and that devastated the fishery. And then the icing on the cake was what you said there, I think 2012, somewhere thereabouts.
I saw a lot of dead fish down there. I talked to Gus Gustafson, and he said, imagine how many didn't show up on the surface. Like Warren was saying, imagine, if you see 5,000 floating or dead or on the bank or whatever, there's probably 30,000 beneath the surface that you didn't see.
Yeah. Yeah.
Hey, Warren, while you're on here, you come in late, so I was going to introduce you, but tell us a little bit about, I'm going to ask you to brag on yourself again, because I know some things. I don't know a lot of the details, but what you've actually did for the conservation of striped bass over the years, the things you did for Russell, and just in general, what started you wanting to do that, and what all have you done?
Okay. Well, I started as part of the Striper Kings. The Striper Kings Club back in the 90s started, in the late 80s and 90s. They were extremely big on conservation back then, with doing a major project with the DNR. So I started my interest in conservation with them. And then as it got to the late 90s, I guess when the biologists came to us, it would have been 1999, I believe. Late 1999, the biologists came to us from Georgia asking if the Striper Kings could help them because they weren't being able to find enough brood fish to be able to stock all of Georgia. And so that's really where I started thinking about the concept of the striper tube. My thoughts were, we have a lot of good tournaments at time of the year when if the anglers could keep their fish alive, the biologists could just take those fish and maybe use them for spawning fish. So that was the whole idea with the striper tubes. But back in 1998 and 99, Georgia had some problems at their hatchery and lost several of their ponds. They had the striped bass fry in it. And Hartwell got zero stocking in 1999, and they got, I believe, if I remember right, like a third of the striper stocking from Georgia in 1998, but zero in 1999. So, I mean, out of self-preservation, because I love the striper fish, we started working with South Carolina DNR and the Georgia DNR, and I'm believing I can't remember if it was Anthony Rayburn that we were working with at the time for Georgia. I think it was before he became a supervisor with them. It was when he was a lake biologist or a regional biologist. But we ended up forming a group arrangement that, because the Georgia Department of Natural Resources wanted to maintain the integrity of the Savannah River striper. They didn't want South Carolina, who gets fish out of the basically the Santee striper. So lake water, the stripers that run up Santee River and the Wateree River. They didn't want to put those fish and dilute the population of natural stripers below the dams, because they'll all flow down through the dams when you stock them.
Warren, what's the difference in those strains of fish? Why didn't they want to mix them? Is there any reason?
They are genetically different. I mean, if you go back and do some studies, there are so many different strains of striped bass. We've got the Gulf strain striped bass, doesn't normally get as big as the fish that we see in the Carolinas. The Gulf strain is unique to all the waters that basically drain into the Gulf of Mexico. And then you've got ours, okay, and the striped bass that we have are called riverine striped bass, because they're unique to a river system. So the stripers that are in the Savannah River are a unique genetic fish. The stripers that are in the Combahee or the Ace Basin, the Ashepoo, Edisto, Combahee River, that's a unique strain of striped bass. As a matter of fact, they even have a characteristic about them that's totally different than all the other riverine striped bass, because to preserve them, their habit, or their selves, if you would, they don't go down into the brackish water. When it gets hot in the summertime, they go upstream into the springs that are way up at the headwaters of those river systems. So each fish is different. And then if you go to basically, you got to get to North Carolina, the fish that run up into the Roanoke River. Those fish, the fish that run to the Delaware River, the fish that run up into the Hudson River, all those fish will go out into the salt water and mix and move up and down the system. But when it's time for them to spawn, they'll break out and go back to their natural spawn water. But our fish don't do that. The number of fish of the riverine stripers that actually go into salt water down here, South Carolina, Georgia, Alabama, Florida, our fish, they just don't do that. They don't go into the salt water and mix up and run up and down the coast like the stripers do from those other rivers up there. So ours are basically unique to a river. Although those others are, there's just a different habit that they do, if you would.
So tell us what you did for Lake Russell.
Okay, about 1999, I was thinking of that Lake Russell was going to become, I mean, when they did the pump back system, they did one blessing for us as far as Lake Russell. The biologists told us that the lake habitat on Lake Russell, it doesn't have a thermocline like the other lakes, not the same. Because of the pump back system, they're mixing that water up in that bay area, right above the Russell Dam in Lake Russell itself. Okay, it's mixing that water so much that the lake habitat in the summertime, they said from around 15, 18 foot from the surface all the way down to the bottom, it's got basically the same temperature and basically the same oxygen content. So stripers could survive there when they can't survive other places. So I'm thinking, okay, if they've got this, Tennessee's got these nice restrictions on that they can actually maintain some trophy fishery, you know, and they had just put in on Boone Lake, they just put in, I believe the first restriction they put on Boone Lake was like 43 inches. The fish had to be 43 inches to take it. They relaxed it down to around 40, but I don't know what they moved it back to. Somebody else may know that. I just haven't. I don't take any Tennessee fish. I go up there, I enjoy the fishery, I catch them, and I let them go. I mean, I got no need. I got these fish that you set here, and I got another wall that's got fish on them. And they were back in tournaments before I could try to keep them alive. And I just like to see them swim.
Mm-hmm.
Dean Cox wanted me to mention, so I will mention this. Dean wanted me to make sure that everybody knew that out of the whole Savannah River chain gang, he was the top in the SBC. And Warren, congratulations on your win on the SBC, by the way. I
appreciate that. It was a beautiful day to be on the lake, and I hadn't been on the lake since the Striper Kings Championship. But I had a good time. But to finish up on Russell, because I was thinking about how much pressure it was going to get, I wanted to develop a fishery there. Russell at that time had only been stocked once, and it was called a political stocking by the South Carolina DNR because somebody with political pressure had asked them to put fish in one time. So it had only been stocked once, and the only other fish that it was getting were fish that would come through the Lake Hartwell Dam and fish that would come through the pump back system out of Parks Hill and survive. So that's an awful expensive way to stock a lake, if you can imagine. So I came up with the idea, okay, why don't we put in a 40-inch restriction on that lake to give us all a trophy fishery for Georgia and South Carolina fishermen to go and enjoy? And the biologists didn't want to do that. They came back to me and they said, because of the unique characteristics of that fishery is extremely rich with bait fish. The bait fish population is so strong that the stripers on that lake take a form that no place else because they grow so fast and they look like footballs. They said that a fish that would be 34 inches would be the same weight of a fish that would be 40 inches on other lakes. So because of that, they came back to me and said, let's put a 34-inch restriction on it. And then I think we ultimately agreed. I think it's 36 now. I can't remember. I think it's one fish over. I can't even remember. One fish over 36 and one fish below. You can keep 2 fish per day per licensed angler.
Well, me and Scott Perry have talked about this numerous times. I think one of the biggest things that actually has protected the striped bass and Russell is the trees. Pete Maley, he's a big artificial guy. And I told him, and he's talking about pulling artificials on Russell. I said, well, you better know exactly where you're pulling them because I don't think I've ever went 100 yards nowhere on Russell and didn't come across a tree somewhere. That'd be a tough lake to fish. And I guess some people do fish artificials, but I know I've lost 3 big fish in Russell. Since I was fishing, I've lost 3 fish downlining trout, and I don't know how big those fish were, but I couldn't stop them. I mean, they just went straight through a tree and it was over. And all you can do is just break it off and keep on fishing.
So you won the SBC, Warren?
Yeah.
I didn't even know
we got a good bite. Yeah, we got a good bite.
So were you pulling live bait or cut baiting or what were you doing?
Everybody calls me the cut bait king, even though Randy Brown's the one that has that title with his name, his username. But I've actually won, well, up until recently, I had won more tournaments pulling bait than I had cut bait. But no, I was pulling bait. We started out with a mix of smaller, with herring and gizzard shads, and we were not using big gizzard shad like I would normally use in a big tournament, but we were using hand-sized ones, thinking that, okay, if we could get 2 12-pound fish, we could win it, but at least finish in the top 5. So that was our objective, and I'd caught a big fish in the area each of the years before the Striped Bass Challenge while I was pre-fishing, but never could pull one in during the Striped Bass Challenge. So I didn't even go practice. I already knew where I wanted to try, and I just said, hey, I'm going there. I'm going to figure 8 and do a few fingers off of it a little bit, but figure 8 and pull bait. As soon as we started, we caught 2 fish pretty quick, about a 7-ish pound hybrid, big thick hybrid. I hadn't seen a hybrid that big in a while, and then I saw a bunch of nice hybrids come into the scales there at the challenge. But then we caught one a little over 8, and I had my team put a couple extra gizzard shad out at that point, start to move from herring to gizzard shad, and all the fish we had caught would come on gizzard shad. Then the 18 the 18 pounder hit, got it in the boat. And then basically I said, okay, now we got a 18 and an 8. Let's try to move everything to big bait, the biggest bait we got. All we want to do is put 10 pound or bigger fish in the boat. So that was our strategy. But we pulled bait, balloons, flat lines, some down rods, and just changed from using some smaller baits to using a little bit larger bait.
Okay. So both those fish came on the larger baits rather than the smaller baits that you brought.
Yeah, both of them did, but the bait weren't that big. I mean, I didn't want anything much bigger than hand size. I did have a couple of gizzard shad that were probably, I don't know, 8 inches long. But I was basically looking for that side that if you lay it in, if you lay it in your hand, you're gonna cover most of your hand. If you would.
We call those dollar bill size.
Hey,
Yeah.
Now Barrett, how long have you been fishing Hartwell? I've known you 7 years, I think.
Long time, probably 10, 12 years. I mean,
now
a
Barrett.
lot more.
Now I know y'all don't nobody get mad at me, but I invited a basser on here tonight. But Barrett has caught a lot of striper. And Barrett, one of my questions for you and Pete's an artificial guy too. But out of all the years, about how many striper have you caught on artificials, and what's your biggest, and what bait was you using, if you remember?
Is that for me?
The biggest one
that's for Barrett.
Hartwell was probably 25 or 30. I don't know. It was a big fish, and it was on a Ben Parker Magnum spoon, dropping to him at the dam, just like everybody else does during the summer.
Yeah.
And it was in, I'm gonna say 2016, and for about 3 or 4 days, we were catching some really nice fish, 10 to 15, and maybe a 20-pound fish. But that's the biggest striper I've caught out of Hartwell. Dad caught one a couple years ago on Russell that was probably about the same size on a fluke bass fishing. But that's about the biggest we've got, which is, I mean, that's still a fish to be proud of, no doubt.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. I don't understand. And there again, we're talking about striper, and I know, when we aggravate JR about catfishing, he likes to throw it up at us, that it's a delicate fish and it has, blah, blah, blah. But I still don't understand, Warren, why does a striped bass have to have so much more oxygen or oxygenated water, say, than a largemouth or even a hybrid? Is it just something in their makeup that they have to have a certain water quality? And one more question, why can't they, if they're in an area where their water quality, they can't breathe, they're having trouble breathing, they don't have enough sense to move or try to move up and down in the water column until they find better water?
There's certain things that they'll put it higher in their hierarchy, their priority hierarchy. The first one is comfort. Comfort being temperature. They'll put temperature down. They'll stay in a water column that their temperature is good before they'll move for bait. They'll stay in a water column where the water temperature is comfortable to them before they'll actually move to oxygenated water. So water temperature really drives what the basic level that striper is going to be. But then oxygen, of course, that they have to have oxygenated water or they'll die. What was the first part of your question, though?
I don't forgot.
Yeah, his first part of the question was, what makes them so delicate? Why are stripers so delicate?
Okay.
And why don't largemouth the hybrid catfish? It's like the hybrid the striper is the most delicate fish in fresh water besides a herring.
Yeah, except in cold water. In cold water, the striper's pretty hardy. But the thing is, a striper, I don't believe that a striper can rake water across his gills like a largemouth can. You'll watch a largemouth when he's sitting still, a bluegill. I mean, they're in the same general family. You'll watch them in the water; they'll sit right there, and their gills will be doing this, okay? And they're basically raking the water and pulling the oxygen that they need. All right, if you look at a striper is always moving. Go to an aquarium like at Bass Pro Shop, or I'll basically tell you. I was at at the Chattanooga Aquarium, and I stood and watched the stripers and the hybrids in that aquarium for about 4 hours. We were on vacation up there, and this was back right before I came up with the idea of the striper tube. And I was watching them, and one thing I noticed was the striper never stopped moving. He was always moving. And then as I began to fish in rivers and occasionally could actually watch stripers, they're always sitting in a position where they don't have to swim very much, but they're always facing upstream, and they're always sitting still right at a current break, if you would, unless they're chasing a bait. But they'll sit there where the current pulls the oxygen across their gills. So I was working on a goldfish pond that I had for my wife, and when I pulled it out to put in a new liner and everything, and I pulled the pipe out that goes from my filter up to my little waterfall, there's about 6 or 8 goldfish that were longer than my thumb fell out of the pipe. And I was sitting there and I'm looking at them flipping around. I pick them up and put them in a bowl. I mean, in a bucket. And the first thing in my mind said, how in the world? I mean, these fish got through the filter, which means they had to come in as fry, and they've been living in here to get to thumb size. And then all of a sudden, I thought, striper, pipe, flow of water. Dude, I believe I can keep stripers alive like that. And that's where the whole idea came from. The idea came from the striper tube. But I noticed that at the Chattanooga Aquarium, in 4 hours of watching them, they never stopped. So I just made the assumption that they must be like a shark. You know, a shark must swim at all times.
So is there something about, and I've heard somebody say this, putting them upside down, nose first, and it kind of makes them not as excited. It takes away their hyperactivity, almost like it paralyzes them, but not in a bad way.
Yeah. Tom Curtis was the supervisor, if you would, the chief biologist at the South Carolina Striped Bass Hatchery. And I had volunteered a lot of effort down there with him, working with him. So I called him up when I came up with this idea about these stripers in a pipe. And I actually made it. My very first striper tube was 6 foot long and had water pumping out of the lake through the pipe, and then a cap at the end, and then flowing back into the lake. And I asked him about that. He said, "Yeah, that'll work." He said, "But I tell you something that'll work better if you could turn them upside and put them on their nose, where their equilibrium and balance would be thrown off." He said, "They'll swim in that pipe if you do it that way with a current, but if you turn them upside down, put the current across their gills for them, they'll just basically go to sleep." And I said, "Well, that's good." He said, "As a matter of fact, if you get them to go to sleep, they'll use less oxygen." I said, "Sounds like a good way to do it." And that's when the upright striper tube concept came in the year 2000.
You know, I bought a set of stripers, some of the first. I don't know if it's the first, but I bought a set of the striper tubes that you made from David Wampole years ago. You remember David Wampole?
Oh, yeah. David and I were good friends. He actually tried doing some modifications to them where he put them down in a little reservoir, started to pump water out of a reservoir up through it and back into a reservoir to allow him to be able to use more oxygen, more water.
Yeah.
You know, it's weird because freshwater holds more dissolved oxygen than saltwater does. So you'd think that they'd thrive in freshwater, but I guess it's got a lot to do with those oxygen things that deprive the oxygen from the water, like, you know, plant life, like we were talking about earlier, things destroying the thermocline, taking the oxygen out of the water, things like that. But as far as just fresh versus salt, you know, there's really not a lot out there in the ocean that's going to soak up a lot of that dissolved oxygen like in fresh.
Yeah. Hey, I noticed there's a question from Benji Smith. You want me to go ahead and answer that question?
Oh, yeah, that's why I'm putting them up.
Okay, so Benji's asking about catching fish on Clarks Hill Lake. There was a biologist, he was studying for his doctorate, and he did a study down at Clarks Hill Lake. I think what Benji's talking about is the one that was done at Dorn Ramp, all right? And what he wanted to do is simulate a tournament. So he had several boats go down there, catch fish. As they were catching them, bring them back to Dorn, and he put a telemetry tag up in their belly, okay, and then use two sutures to tie that that cut up, and then he released them. And he said that all that would stimulate all the rough handling that they would go through, being taken to a weigh-in scale, putting on a scale, and then brought back to the water and released. So he was trying to do that. That was done in January and February, if we're talking about the same time, Benji. But Sean Young did that study. It's out. It's actually available in the American. Yeah, that's it. It's actually available in the American Fisheries Society in their archive. But it was an amazing result. And he let people use ice chests. He let people use live wells, and he let people use striper tubes. And he made a note of what the difference in the fish, and they put a telemetry tag in every one of them. And if you find that study, it said that all fish were healthy on release. 100% of the fish were healthy on release. So that meant that the fish being held in the ice chest and the bait wells and the fish in the striper tube, they all appeared to look healthy on release. But then 2 weeks later, they went out with the telemetry study and found them, and they found every single striper that was released in the striper tube, and they found every single striper 2 weeks later again, 4 weeks after it, and then 6 weeks after it, and they were all moving around. But unfortunately, even though the fish that looked good on release out of the bait tanks and ice chests, only 50% of them were still alive 2 weeks later. And I think the big difference is, can a person keep their fish alive in a bait well and all? Yes. I don't think there's a problem with that. But if they want their fish to be healthy, take that bait well and make it into a current. Confine that fish where that fish has to face one direction, and then make a current where you're going to force the water across their gills. Because the big scientific study that makes the striper tube work, it's like the striper tube serves as a like an intensive care after we've had surgery. The striper's down, we're pushing that oxygenated water across their gills, and that's causing the lactic acid that's in their body to dissolve and break up. And if you put one down and he's not swimming, yeah, he can stay alive, and yeah, he'll release, but he hasn't released that lactic acid unless you take that bait tank or that live well and actually make a current in it. And you can do it. Just put a divider in there or put some kind of pipes in there, force a current so that the fish are facing a current, and those fish will do well just as they do in the striper. Well, maybe not as good, because I think the striper tube and the fact that it keeps them from fighting against themselves, I think that adds something to it. But they'll do better on release if people just make dividers and make the fish face into a current.
Me and Brady Milford was talking one night about fishing, and Brady said it best. He said, I know there's a lot of mortality in releasing striped bass, but he said the way I look at it, if I put him back in the water, he's got a 50% chance of living, at least a 50% or better. He said if I put him in the cooler, he's dead. So
right on that.
Yeah. So I don't like to kill fish. I've purposely killed one fish in Tennessee, is a 52-pound striper, and the only striped bass I've ever personally killed in my life is that one fish. Actually, JR gets on to me because he said, when we were at Chesapeake Bay, he's wanting a video, and I understand he's wanting a video, and he said, all I hear from Wes is, hurry up, Wes, hurry up, video him. We got to get him back in the water. We got to get him back in the water. But he said, damn, you got on my nerves with saying that.
Yeah.
Well,
I need at least 4 to 8 seconds of steady footage to make a video. So
now, Wes,
that's not going to hurt those fish. That's not going to hurt those fish.
Yeah.
I've just got it in my mind that if that fish is out in the water, he's not breathing. The longer he can't get no oxygen, the harder it's going to be for him to live when I put him back in the water. And that's just my,
Okay, let me tell you a quick story. The striped bass challenge at Santee. I went down there and fished the striped bass challenge at Santee. The very first fish we caught was a slot limit fish, and the guy that I was fishing with down there says, I didn't have the striper tube ready. So he said, let's just keep that one and we'll put him on ice and, cause we'll catch more. Well, he put it on ice in the ice chest. I got the striper tube ready. And I said, hey, just for giggles here, guys, let's put that fish in the striper tube. It had been on that ice. It had been on that ice for 6 or 7 minutes. And we put it in the striper tube. He said, that fish is dead. I said, but if it's dead in the striper tube, it's no more dead than it was in the ice chest.
Yeah.
And he said, yeah, okay. Well, a little bit later, we caught another fish. We put it on the second side of the striper tube. About 10 minutes later, we caught another fish. And he said, I said, it's bigger than the first one that we had. Let's go ahead and replace it and put that one back on the ice if you won't need it. He said, okay. When I pulled the stringer out with the fish, it about killed me. It only been in the striper tube about 30 minutes, but it was alive and kicking. And then they put that fish on the ice, and I felt sick at my stomach. I kept the fish. I brought the fish back, and then they still wanted to put it on ice, but they kept it to eat. So,
What was you gonna say, Barrett?
I was gonna say, yeah, I know you and Scott Morgan used to kill the shit out of them.
No, that's when I first started, and I was fishing with Scott. So I can't tell a man what to do on his own boat.
Party fish.
Hey, my first real striper trip, I went with Scott Morgan, and we were in Little River in Georgia, and we caught like 65 fish that day. They were, I think the biggest one was like 12 pounds, but I just knew I found my calling, man. We were pulling planer. I didn't even know what a planer board was, and you know, and that's really what got me started in the striper. And then, you know, like I said, and then of course you always want to get something bigger. So I wanted to catch a bigger fish. So I asked a couple of questions about Russell, and all I got was shh and you know, you don't want to fish Russell. It's hard. It's this. It's that. Well, you know, I'm hard headed. I'm gonna fish it anyway. So I fished Russell 5 times. I made 5 trips to Russell. I'm out there right in the middle of the lake, drowning the shit out of trout and pulling the paint off planer boards, and they ain't got nothing. So some guy told me, he said, Wes, he said, I'll tell you this. He said, you're fishing in the wrong place. He said, this time of year, find you a creek, go all the way to the back of it, get shallow as your boat, and go put planer boards out, and pull out of that creek. So I went down to Clifford. I found the closest creek to Clifford's Marina. And on my 6th trip, I'll never forget this. I'm going to make this long story real short. I looked up and I prayed and I said, listen, old man. I said, I done spent a lot of money and I done made a lot of trips fishing. And I done, if everybody says, I done paid my dues and probably 2 or 3 other fishermen. It's time for me to catch a fish. So I started coming out of that creek. When I made that left turn, I had a free line go off. And while I was fighting that fish, as soon as it hit the boat, I had 2 planer boards go off. Boom, zoom, and just. So I had 2 fish over 25 pounds, and I lost one in a tree. I don't know how big that fish was. And you talking about a happy camper, and I was stuck from that day striper fishing. So
yeah. Hey, you asked a question about Russell, and I only hit one part of it, and that was the size limit, putting the size limit restrictions on it.
Yeah.
The other part that's just as important was you had South Carolina was willing to do this, but we had to convince Georgia to do it. So we had meetings with Georgia and the Georgia DNR. They work by board as opposed to South Carolina works by legislature. Okay. But once we got the agreement, the other part was that that Lake Russell would become a stock lake and that it would receive a stocking at least every other year. So prior to that, there were no stocking to Lake Russell except through the dams. After that agreement, after that size restriction, and after a 2 fish limit, because prior to that, the limit was 10 fish per person, just like the other lake, even though the lake wasn't stocked. So size limit, creel limit, size structure, and stocking was all part of that agreement. All that started around around 2002, 2003.
Now, last I heard, Warren, South Carolina wasn't even stocking Hartwell no more. Georgia was. Is that correct?
South Carolina stocked a percentage of the hybrid. Georgia stocks a percentage of the hybrid. Now, I'm not sure because I haven't talked to the biologist in the last couple of years, but the arrangement that we made because of the 1999, 1998, and 2000 reduced stocking was South Carolina told Georgia that they wanted to work with them. And what Georgia agreed to do was 50% of the fish that are supposed to go into Hartwell and to Clark's Hill, 50% of those fish would go to the striped bass hatchery South Carolina striped bass hatchery. So Georgia would produce them, South Carolina would raise them, and South Carolina would stock them. So therefore, we were guaranteeing that 2 different locations were holding these fish and raising them. So if Georgia basically a duplication of rearing them, so that if one location lost them, we'd still get a stocking. So the first 5 years that went into place, which I believe was 2001, 2, 3, 4, and 5. Those first 5 years, the Striper Kings would go down because the budget, the hatchery didn't put it in their budget. The Striper Kings would go down and pick the fish up at the Richmond Hill hatchery, and then we would get, all the fish that's supposed to go in Hartwell and Clark Hill, and they would be just fingerlings. They'd be 7 to 10 days old, and then, I'm sorry, not fingerlings, fry. They'd be 7 to 10 days old, and then we would transport them from the Georgia Richmond Hill hatchery all the way over to the Bono hatchery, St. Stephen's hatchery, South Carolina. Yeah, okay. And then around 2005, South Carolina started put it in their budget, and they started actually going and getting the fish themselves. So I'm assuming that program is still in, but I'm not 100% sure.
Now, is anything being stocked in Russell now?
They're supposed to get a stocking every other year from Georgia.
Do you know what they're stocking? How many?
It's supposed to be, I don't remember the number, but it's based, I believe it was based on similar to the Tennessee stocking at 2 or 3 fish per acre of water.
Is it true that Hartwell has a natural reproduction of striper? I've been told that it's one of the very few lakes around here that actually does. Yes or no?
Hartwell?
Yeah.
You're asking Hartwell. The only system that would be long enough that would even come close to allowing natural reproduction on Hartwell would be 23 Mile Creek. I'm sorry. Dude, the creek that's up right above, the one that had the dams in it that they took out, right above Clifton. And it doesn't have it. There wouldn't be enough stock fish that could run up there and spawn and come down. Shoot, what is the name of that creek? 12 Mile Creek. Some places it's called 12 Mile River, but that's the only system that's long enough that could even potentially do it. But no, to my knowledge, there's the only South Carolina natural reproduction is in the Santee system. It's the only place that has a long enough river system. And the next closest would be the Bugs Island Lake up in the North Carolina, Virginia border, and then the lake. Yeah.
Roanoke
and then
River.
The lake over at Georgia and Alabama line up there. I can't even think of the name of that lake.
Wheeler.
I'm sorry?
Lake Wheeler or Smith Lake?
No, it was on the Alabama-Georgia line.
Not Lanier.
No. We did tournaments on it. It's known for crappie fishing. My mind's going blank. I'm getting old, guys.
West Point.
Float.
No.
Eufaula.
No.
Guttersville. No. That's Alabama. No.
White's Lake.
It's the one that's really best known for crappie fishing.
Is it that one Alan Jackson sang about? No, that was a river, wasn't it?
Chattahoochee River. Yeah. I'll think of it as soon as we hang the phone up.
Yeah.
Why is there not a size limit on Hartwell for stripers? I've always been curious as to that. And as me and Wes were talking about earlier today, and I'm not here to point fingers or anything like that, but as far as the guide services go, with the state that the striper fishing's in on Hartwell, it's just not really sustainable. Going 2 parties a day, keeping 50 fish a day. Why is there not a size limit?
Caleb, no, it's not Granada Lake.
Here we go. Okay, you got Willis Lake, Jordan Lake.
Weiss, that's it. Weiss.
Weiss.
Yeah. The river system above Weiss is long, and it's naturally reproducing. As a matter of fact, those fish, most of those fish are the Savannah River system striper. And so Georgia actually goes up there, and that's where they're getting a large number of their brood fish since about 2005, 2006 timeframe. They get a lot of their brood fish from up there for stocking the Georgia waters. So the question, what was the question that was asked before that?
Barrett asked the question on why isn't there a size limit on Hartwell?
Oh, darn good question, guys. I mean, that's a really good question. There actually is a size limit. A lot of people don't realize it, but okay, it's got a hybrid fishery in it. And because it's a hybrid, and they won't stop stocking hybrid because it's one of the biggest revenue producers for the state as far as fisheries are concerned. So with a hybrid fishery and the fact that the average person can't tell the difference between a small hybrid, a small striper and a hybrid, they find it extremely difficult to put a minimum size limit. Although 12 inches would be fine with me. Why keep a fish less than 12 inches long, whether it's a hybrid or a striper? So it's a hybrid fishery. The average life expectancy of a hybrid is 7 years. So think about it like this. The majority of the hybrid stock in the year 2000 were gone, or 2015 are going to be gone this year. All right. So each year the population of hybrid goes down considerably just because their life expectancy is not very long. Okay. The striper, on the other hand, in our fresh waters live 15, 18, 20 years longer if they don't get caught in some kind of bad water quality system or if an angler doesn't catch them. So because of that, because if you asked and you received a 5 fish limit, and a lot of people have thrown that out for years, take the limit down to 5 fish. The problem with that is that the South Carolina DNR would immediately recalculate, and would basically, them in Georgia would start stocking about 50% of the fish that they stock, because it is a put, grow, and take fishery, and the biggest take of those fish is human. Most of those fish are actually caught unless you have a fish kill. So because of that, I wanted to protect, and you can blame me, guys. I'm the one that came up with the idea. I'm the one that put it. I was on the committee to try to protect all of our striper fishes and all of our lakes. I went down to the Santee with the group, the stakeholders group. I met with all of them. I've been involved in all that kind of stuff, but I came up with the idea of the 3 fish over 26-inch limit. So even these years ago, you could watch guides that would get on a school of 8, 9, 10-pound fish, and their party would take 10 fish per person. At least now. What's that?
What's the limit on Murray? Is the first 5 or I fished
that's only in the summertime.
Yeah.
That's only in the summertime. It's 5 fish, must be 21 inches long or longer on Murray, except during the summertime, and then it's 5 fish and quit.
Yeah. Now, Murray,
but on Hartwell,
what did they mean by? And I just heard you say this, and there a couple of years ago when I really liked Hartwell, and I really fished Hartwell and had a lot of interest in it, I made a couple of comments one time, and a lot of those guides really disowned me, which I don't give a damn. I don't need them. But about killing, and there again, people can say what they want to. Warren, you may disagree with me. I know they do. But you can't tell me guys catching hundreds and hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of fish a day out of a lake, and they're saying they're not hurting it. And their big thing, it's a put and take fishery. What does put and take mean? What do they mean? Because that's all it's a put and take fishery. We're not hurting nothing.
It means it controls the amount of stocking. Like on Lake Norman, for example, they were stocking 180,000 fingerlings, and all the anglers were like, stock more, stock more. South Carolina's stocking 500,000, 1 million, Well, they started to stock more, and that's when they started the tagging program, so they could keep track of how many fish were being harvested. And what they realized was they could actually get away with stocking more because they were being harvested, because they don't want to stock too many if they're not being harvested, because they're going to deplete the oxygen and we're going to have another fish kill. So they're trying to find that happy medium, that balance there. I think that's it.
But I don't think it's any different than take deer. If you got 100 acres and you shoot every deer that walks out, at some point you're not going to have any more deer to shoot.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well,
but the deer
look at
they don't get stalked by the government though.
yeah, but look at it like this, Wes. If the guides are taking 100 out, and they're doing that consistently year after year after year, then that means the fish are there. You know, the
Yes.
fish are there. If the
For how
guys are
long?
taking hundreds, and the next year they're taking tens and tens, and the next year they're taking ones and ones, that's what happened on
Fish aren't
Santee. Then that means the fish aren't there. I
Exactly.
mean, that's the big thing was the senator responsible for the area around Santee. They were going to make 100% of the South Carolina striped bass hatchery go into Santee. So they formed a committee to work on it. I was on that committee. And while I was working on that committee to try to improve Santee, which it worked. I mean, if we went down there, we caught over 50 fish in that Santee tournament, but it worked. And what I wanted to do was protect the striped bass population. So let them take those hybrids. But I wanted to protect the striped bass population, which would live to be 20 years old, 20 years, versus hybrids, which would live to be 7. And so that's why the 3 fish
If
over
that.
26-inch limit was put in place on Hartwell. Yeah, you can take 10 fish, and the guides can sit on top of a school of smaller fish, or if they go to a school of big fish, they got to leave them because the limit 3 fish per angler over 26 inches. And I think you're going to see that come back to help that fishery get our 20-pound fish in the future, and then help maintain those fish in the future. Because I mean, you don't know just how bad that fishery was hurt in 2017, and then really back around 2012, 11, 12, 13 time frame. I don't have my notes in front of me, but I mean, it was hurt really badly.
Well, when they put the limits on when they finally set those limits for striped bass on Santee Cooper, look how much that fisheries came back in the last 3 years, 4 years.
Yeah, but the main purpose of that structure when it started out on Santee was to allow the female striper to get to spawn one time. And that's why they put in that limit originally at 26 inches and to get that female to spawn one time. Then they reduced that limit, that restriction out to 25 inches because they found out that stripers were reaching, the females were reaching spawning age a little quicker in that lake than they were thinking that they would. And then the population came back so well that they ended up putting that slot limit down there. And the purpose of that slot limit is still to try to help as many females that can make it to the spawning limit as possible. But it really has no biological rationale for the slot limit. The slot limit basically was driven by the guides wanting to be able to fish and put their party on fish, and them going to their politicians and getting their politicians to help them. There was no scientific fact for a slot limit. There's a scientific fact for a naturally reproducing fishery to have a minimum size limit, but not necessarily the slot limit. So the slot limit was put in place to satisfy guides, satisfy the legislature, and try to protect as many of those female stripers get them to spawn as they could. But you're right. I went down there when you couldn't catch a striper. They took us out, and the guides took us out when I was on that committee and tried to put us on stripers. Never caught a one. Then I went back halfway through the program, and yes, we were catching fish, and they were the 22, 23-inch fish. And then this past December, I mean, I was so pleased to know that I had a part of that. Yeah. Went down there and caught between 50 and 60 stripers, and they were almost, 80% of them were slot limit or bigger. I mean, the fishery has really come back down there.
Yeah. And it'll stay that way if they don't. And like Scott Perry said, and there's no way, of course, you'd have to guess at just how many people don't go by the limits. They're not going by the rules. And like Scott said, it would help if we had enough DNR agents to help enforce the rules we have. So there's no way to even calculate how many fish is being caught and kept and fish over the limit. And, it's just, I don't know.
Yeah.
Bass.
Unfortunately, what Scott's posting is true. You just don't see enough enforcement. But I will say, if you spend more time on the Georgia side than the South Carolina side, you will find yourself getting checked a little more often than you do, unfortunately, on the South Carolina side. I've been checked several times, but most of the time I've been checked has been when I was in Georgia water by a Georgia law enforcement officer.
Warren, and I've said this a couple of times, and I could be wrong since you're on here. I don't know if you'd agree or disagree, but talking about Russell, my opinion, the biggest thing that hurt Clark's Hill. The biggest thing that hurt Clark's Hill was when they put that oxygen line in and didn't rope it off during the summertime. And I went out there one day, like everybody else, I want to catch fish. And we got 20 feet off that oxygen line and limited out in 30 minutes, and it was over. And I'm like, and people's doing it, just doing that during the summer, you couldn't get a boat around that thing, and that's what the guys were doing, getting their fish and leaving. Just my opinion, I think that's one thing that hurt Clark's Hill's fishery was they didn't rope that oxygen line off in the summertime.
That's a good possibility. Now, that is a difference. When you're talking about a guide's going out there and taking hundreds and hundreds of fish, my assumption is if there's nothing like that that's basically pulling those fish into a fishbowl, if you would, if it's just the entire fishery, then I don't think the guides can hurt the population that much as long as the biologists they keep stocking the fish in. But if you look at a situation like that, where the fish have basically two areas to go to, either the oxygen lines or the waters that are below it and around it, or right behind the Russell Dam, and then you've got the pump back that's diluting the water quality up there. If they allow that pump back to run hundreds of times, they're going to destroy Russell as well, Lake Russell itself, because they're going to change the water temperature in both of those lakes. If they ran that oxygen line, that cold water, you used to be able to go behind the Russell Dam and on Clark's Hill and find 56-degree water on the bottom and 20 foot of water all day long. But if they let that pump back station run, what happens is they're pulling that water out, mixing it up there in Lake Russell. They're now letting it go back. Do that over a week, and the water temperature being brought back into the lake is now higher because it's mixed with that Russell water. And then they're pumping it back. The next thing you know, at 20 foot below, down at the bottom, it's no longer 56. It's no longer 64. It gets up to 68, 70, 72. And those big fish, they can't survive. So I'm glad they haven't been running that pump back 100% of the time. But the more they run it, the worse that tail race fishery is going to be.
Now, when did Clark Hill stock stripers before they stocked hybrids? When did they introduce hybrids stockings into Clark Hill?
The very first stripers were stocked naturally when they built the dam. So when they built the dam, they landlocked stripers into it, just like they did Santee. I'm not sure when they developed the hybrid. I could have done some research and brought that back.
I think that's probably got a lot to do with, like, as far as a fishery, a lake being a trophy fishery, is whether or not they stock hybrids, because you can have much more strict regulations on if it were just a striper fishery. If they start introducing hybrids and stocking hybrids, then those regulations become a lot less, and then the stripers are going to get taken before they reach trophy size, because the regulations
I agree with that. Russell was not supposed to receive a stocking of hybrids. The only hybrids that you should find in Russell, unless they've changed the agreement that was made, the only hybrids you should find in Russell are those that come back up through the pump back or those that come through the turbines on Lake Hartwell.
Two of the biggest hybrid ever caught in my life, I caught on Russell.
It's got some in it. It does. It's just not supposed to be stocked with hybrids. It's supposed to be stocked with stripers every other year at a stocking rate of around 3 per acre.
Let me ask you this, Martin, and there again, why, and Scott even said it, is there more DNR presence on Murray, and why is there more DNR presence? Because I fished Hartwell for 8 years, and I never got checked one time, not once, and I fished it hard for about 4 years.
I got a feeling that the answer to that comes to mortality. There's so many people that do so many stupid things on Murray, as far as boaters are concerned, that there's more law enforcement there, more for boating than it is for fishery regulation. That's just a gut feeling. I'm not saying anything from knowledge. I'm just telling you an opinion.
Why has Murray got so many more fish in Hartwell? What are they doing different? Is it the limits? Is it the water quality?
It's more fertile.
Yes, it is more fertile. It used to be that the most fertile lakes we had was the Santee system, Greenwood, Wateree, and then Murray. Okay, but with all the improvements that they've made to try to prevent runoff, unfortunately, runoff, okay, causes the fertility level of the lake to go up. Fertility level of the lake going up has an adverse effect in that the more bait fish you got, the more increase is going to be in decay, oxygen decay, things falling into the bottom of the lake and decaying. And so more things that do that, then you have the lower lake of the lake that has the lower portion of the lake that has no oxygen rising higher and higher. Same thing that happened to Hartwell when the fish kill happened those two times. And that happens at Lake Murray. That's the biggest cause of the Lake Murray fish kill. It's just poor water quality. And they'll make it out like, okay, it's just a condition of the times. But on Lake Murray, unfortunately, it really is driven a lot by how it used to be SCE&G, but I can't remember the company that bought SCE&G, but it's really down to the management of turbine number 5. Turbine number 5 is at a lower level, at a level where the stripers and the oxygenated water is at. And when they pull out of it, they basically are pulling water that has oxygen out that cannot be replaced until the wintertime.
I think that's what's happening with Lake Norman. And Frank asked if oxygen line would help on Lake Norman. I think it would, because Lake Norman is now, I mean, it was never a trophy striper fishery ever. Yeah. And, now that we've realized that lake's just not suitable to hold stripers, and it being a hybrid only lake, I think it would help.
Our state is too cheap to do something like that.
I was reading a thing on the app earlier, and I called a buddy of mine, and I don't know if y'all have heard this, but we've got a small lake up here in Greenville called Lake Conisty. You know where that is, don't you, Warren?
Yeah.
Never heard of it.
Well, there was a couple of textile mills years ago, back in the 50s and 60s. And back then, before water was really regulated and what you did with your waste, these mills and a couple of steel plants there in Conisty was dumping all of their waste, all of their biohazardous waste into the Reedy River. Well, in 1970 or 71, when they put regulations on it, they stopped it. They had already been dumping this stuff in there for over 22, 25 years. And they made a dam there in Conisty. So they're trying to keep all that backed up. Well, now they say that dam's cracking and they're scared it could bust any day now from all the rain we got a couple of weeks ago. Mm-hmm. And now all of a sudden, the city of Greenville said, we don't want to fix it. Greenville County said it's not ours. The city says it's not ours. And they said it was roughly estimated right now at about $47.5 million to correct this problem. Well, now what they're saying is if that dam busts, it's going to do damage all the way down to Murray. That contaminated water could get, and I don't know, does the Reedy feed into it, or is it where the Reedy feeds into Saluda and Saluda feeds into Murray? Warren, do you know that?
The Reedy River runs down, if I'm not mistaken, it runs down into Lake Greenwood. It goes through Lake Greenwood Dam into the Saluda, and then the Saluda down into Lake Murray. If I remember right.
They said it could do damage as far down as Lake Murray. And they said it could cause billions of dollars of damage and cleanup and stuff. And this little dam, JR, I don't know if you can pull a picture of it up on Google right quick. Google Conisty Dam in Conisty, South Carolina. It don't look like there's a lot to it, but they say it could be catastrophic if that dam busts.
You worry me with the years of sediment that's in there that would be contaminated sediment. That's what would worry me, not the level of water that's behind it.
Yeah, it's what's in the sediment. Let's see. I don't know if I can find this or not. But I was reading that tonight. I meant to bring that up earlier, and that won't be good.
So once again, the state of South Carolina wants to take no responsibility whatsoever.
That's a fact.
For any water quality issues, none whatsoever. Never their fault.
Try to get it for you, Wes.
I got it. That's one picture of it right there. But it's crazy to think that a dam that size, if it busts, could do billions of dollars worth of damage. And just the water, because if I'm not mistaken, Lake Greenwood supplies about 95% of the water in Lawrence County and Greenwood County. And then if it gets there, what it can do from there when it gets in the Reedy River, in the Saluter system, it goes all the way to Murray. It's going to be bad. Oh, this dam's 128. It's 128 years old.
It's pretty old.
I read the headlines earlier about it, but I didn't read the article.
Yeah, it's going to be bad. And there again, the city of Greenville. There it is. City of Greenville don't want to have nothing to do. It said that's not our problem. The county says it's not our problem. And then one of the councilmen said, well, at the end of the day, neither one of us has got $47 million. So I don't know. I don't know what they're going to do about it.
Now, Warren, I have a question for you, and this is just something I'm curious about. I know when Clarks Hill and Murray had grass, the bass fishing was probably the best it'll ever be around here. Did that help or hurt the striper fishing?
It actually kept the water level.
Hydrilla.
Yeah, the hydrilla, it had its pros and cons. As a cut bait fisherman, I don't like to throw bait into a bunch of hydrilla, but it actually kept the fish from going down deep in the lake because it kept the shallower water cool, and it kept the shallow water oxygenated. It actually put oxygen in the water. So we were catching stripers pulling planer boards in July because of the hydrilla, around the hydrilla bed.
Right.
So, I don't really like the fish with the hydrilla, but it has its pros and cons.
Right. It definitely did seem to help the fish, the fish quality, the health of the fish, maybe.
Yeah.
Probably helps.
Yeah, they were healthier, and you didn't have the fish kills when the hydrilla was there because they just did not go down that deep. They didn't have to. They got to spread out more.
Right. And I have another question. I don't know if you've seen it, but I caught a striper this past weekend, probably a 10-pounder, and I don't know what they call them, but it's like the lice that they have in their mouth. The
copepods.
Yeah. What is that exactly? And I know anybody that does striper fish, especially the Savannah River chain, has seen that, and probably a lot of people don't know what that is. So can you explain that better for us?
We call it the water lice, copepod. There's a lot. All the waters have copepod. It's just amazing about how the copepod population began to basically expand so much in the year, in the 2000s. Okay, 2004, 5, and I watched it back then before it actually exploded in the South Carolina area. It was up in Tennessee. They don't hurt the quality of the fish as far as eating is concerned. The fish are perfectly fine to eat. The problem with the copepod, as I understand it, is it hurts the fish's metabolism to the point that if put under stress, excess stress, whether it be by the habitat or by the angling, if an angler catches them, it reduces their ability to survive and release because they're put under so much stress.
Hey, Warren.
Yeah.
You might have just put up this word, and I remember this from fishing back here years ago. What was gill maggots and what actually caused them?
That's the copepod. We call them gill maggots. Water lice, some people like to call them water lice, but gill maggots is what we call them because they would infiltrate the gill systems. And just think about it like this. When they're attached on the gills, that's an area of the striper that part of the gill cannot grab oxygen as it's coming through the water to them. So the more gill maggots that they have, the more copepods that they have, the less likely they can recover themselves from from the stress, and the way that they can recover from stress is oxygenation.
Hey, JR, what year was it that the gill maggots decimated the striper fishery in Norman? Remember that?
I do not remember that.
I want to say it was 01, 02 when it hit. That
was long before I even started striper fishing.
Yeah.
Warren,
it was in the early 2000s.
Yeah.
Were you fishing Hartwell? Were you fishing Hartwell when they released all the PCBs and they had the big contamination thing? Were you striper fishing then?
Who's you asking?
You.
Hey.
Yeah.
To my knowledge, that first started before I was ever fishing. I started fishing for stripers in 1989. I started tournament fishing for stripers in 1990, and basically have fished for stripers ever since then. I took my large. I don't call them bass. I'm sorry. Okay, I don't call them bass. I took my largemouth boat and I sold it, and bought me a real bass boat, a striped bass boat.
There you go. That's right.
But yeah, it's up to 12 Mile. It's basically what you said about the Conisty. It's up 12 Mile Creek, 12 Mile River, some people call it. And that's where the contamination started. And the big fear was all the sediment below those dams as they began to take those dams out and all that basically coming down. And I mean, if you dug down deep into the lake, anywhere up the river up to 12 Mile, and I mean, even in the river, of course, Kiowee, it wouldn't be in Kiowee because it can't flow upstream. It would basically be from where 12 Mile runs in, where the Kiowee and the 12 Mile Creek run together and form the headwaters of the Seneca River. Yeah, right there, the Seneca River, I guess that's what it's called there. Those two move together, becomes the Seneca River until it gets down to the Tougaloo and the Seneca River form the mouth of the Savannah River. But yeah, if you went up in that area, the contamination was pretty bad, and that's why they recommended not eating the fish or not eating very much of the fish. And they put striper on there specifically because their thoughts were the stripers run all over the lake. So just as likely the fish you caught way up the Tougaloo River might have been in the 12 Mile Creek area, months before or weeks before.
Do you think they could have, were the catfish probably considered one of the more the fish not to eat, since they do feed on the bottom, but striper feed on the bottom also? So yeah, stripers feed on the bottom, catfish feed on the bottom. Both of them like dead bait and live bait.
And
catfish eat other fish, just like a striper. They eat other fish.
That's what I was going to say.
Right. There's no cut bait in the lake. The only cut bait in the lake is from when fish feed, and there's pieces of fish falling, below them. And when we cut them, there ain't no cut bait swimming around. They're not swimming around eating cut bait. They're eating fish.
Yeah, my thoughts, JR. My thoughts are. When you have these small schoolies coming into these baits of fish, the bait fish, a lot of them get injured, and the schoolie stripers, if you would, injure a lot of bait fish that sink down to the bottom, and then that's what the bigger stripers and the catfish will feed on. But you're right, they eat live fish, bluegill, anything they can catch.
What were you saying, Barrett?
I think catfish eat, more live bait. I mean, I catch plenty of catfish bass fishing, eat more live bait and live shad than just about any other fish out there. They're still a predator, just like anything else.
Yep.
You catch them on cut bait, but
they just don't get after it like other fish. Catfish will just sit there and they just eat when they want to.
Mm-hmm. Well, Warren, let me ask you a question. Why is a largemouth bass called a bass and it's not even a bass? It's in the perch family.
It's in the sunfish family, actually.
It's the sunfish. Remember the sunfish family. First cousin to a bluegill is what I would always say. I tell you, when it got named bass, when people were naming all the other things around, and So it was identified as a bass. I think mostly because the people that were doing that had called the saltwater black bass a bass. That was a bass, and so they called that a bass as well. But I used to say as a joke to my fishing buddies, okay, and I know you got one up, largemouth fishing buddies, you got one of them on here, but I used to say that, I imagine Ray Scott, 1965, 1966, was imagining this big tournament system where people would be catching these largemouth and they would take them into an arena for a weigh-in, and fireworks was going to go off in the background, exploding everywhere. And all he could see was on the screen behind the winner, it said Sunfish Master. And that just didn't work for him, and so he had to call it Bass Master.
That's pretty good. I mean, there are other fish that are misnamed, like white perch. White perch isn't actually in the perch family; it's in the Bourbon family, like the striper. And, yellow perch is actually a true perch. So.
Yeah, you got the yellow bass, you got the white bass, you got the striped bass. Of course, you got the crossed hybrid, and the white perch. Okay, unfortunately, it's part of that as well.
Does anybody catch any white bass anymore, or is that just pretty much extinct around here?
I think any lake that has white perch is there. It's probably not going to have white bass.
Yeah.
So I can actually concur that we did catch a couple white bass on Friday on the Hartwell. So they're in there. During the dinner, we asked Wes about, or the whole crew about white bass, and everyone's like, "Huh? White bass? What? Who? What the hell is that?" But we did catch a couple legit white bass on Friday.
Nice.
That's awesome, man. Yeah, you should have documented that. You should have took a picture, at least.
Actually, I think I have one somewhere. We did take a picture.
Dieter said, "Where's Scott at? He's been on here."
He popped in and out.
Dieter said that white bass are on watery, so I was wrong.
There are a lot of white bass on watery. I agree with that for sure.
I assumed that if a lake had the white perch, then the white bass fishery was decimated, but apparently not.
Baden Lake, local to us there, it has come back with white bass big time. Like today, we caught a whole bunch that are 16, 18 inches. I mean, big white bass.
There's just a lot less of them in a white, a lake with white perch. There'll be a lot less.
Our state actually stocked white bass on Tuckertown a couple of years back. And those white bass have made it all the way down to Baden Lake, and they're doing very well. It's actually quite nice where you're striper fishing and you catch white bass.
Yeah.
Break up the monotony of it all.
And I've always heard, and y'all can tell me if this is true because I'm not a striper fisherman, but I've always heard the stripers decimated the white bass.
No, that's not true. Stripers don't decimate white bass. My understanding of what decimated the white bass is the white perch. And the reason being is the white bass are the first to move up into the creeks to spawn, followed shortly behind with the white perch, and the white perch have a field day on the eggs and the fry of the white bass, and that's what decimates it.
Right.
Yeah.
And white perch will eat about anything.
Apparently they can still have some left though. As Peter and Dieter said that they just named 2 or 3 different lakes that still have white bass, but you just don't catch them as often. It's kind of like the yellow perch on Lake Wiley. They used to be everywhere. Now
from today's trip,
you rarely catch one now.
They're pretty big.
Yeah, that's a white bass.
Yep.
I thought maybe it was a hybrid for a second, but
nope.
Well, I've always heard people say, other than a gar, one of the biggest predators in fresh water was a spotted bass. They're probably one of the most aggressive fish in fresh water. Is that correct?
They act a lot like a white perch. They get out there.
I would say a white perch is probably worse than a spotted bass.
Really?
I think,
but
spotted bass get moody. They get where at times they're just not going to bite. They're not going to eat anything.
They're more like a white perch than a largemouth is.
Oh, absolutely, yeah.
They're much more migratory. They're not as residential. They're out there, being pelagic and chasing things like herring, and you catch them a lot of times with if you're hybrid fishing. I'm sure Peter probably catches a lot of spot bass while he's pulling them paddle.
Dieter Melhorn. Dieter, I'm gonna send you an invite.
Kill them all. Kill all the spotted bass.
Yeah.
Well, they're kind of the savior for Lake Norman. Lake Norman is doing very well with the spotted bass. It holds the state record for spot bass.
Well,
And
you do. So they actually dropped the limits on bass in Lake Norman because they have taken over. They want you to keep.
they do. They do want,
one
but
bass you
what
catch
I'm
on Lake
saying
Norman.
is they've gotten a lot bigger. 5 years ago, 2 pounds was big for a spot bass. Now on Lake Norman, I mean, people are catching 3 to 5 pounders on the reg now, spot bass. So you say what you want, but when you can go out to Lake Norman and bring a 20-pound bag of fish to the scale, that's good. That's good for around here.
What does the largemouth population look like on?
Not very good. Not very good. No. Unfortunately, Wiley was our big largemouth lake, and now the spot bass are taking over it as well.
Yeah.
So 2 years ago, they stocked our lake with F1s. I guess a special type of largemouth, and they think it's supposed to do very good in our lake. And as of right now, I think they're struggling with the growth rate of those fish.
Well, and I'll say, and at least here at Hartwell, the largemouth population has probably it's at its peak that it has been since I've started fishing the lake. I mean, there's not many times that we go anymore and don't catch one 6+. Catch a 6-pounder just about every time, especially this time of year. But
wow, hey, I got a Freightliner bass tournament at the end of February. If you want to drive them up here,
I'll hook you up at the end of February.
End of February.
I'll hook you up.
Do you fish Lake Wiley, Eddie?
I've been there once. It was all right, but mainly Savannah River chain, a little bit on Murray. That's about it.
Okay. Yeah, Murray's
now,
good.
What about kiwi, Barrett? Do you like? Now I heard when Hartwell got real bad about 2 years ago, a lot of the guys, not a lot, but there was quite a few guys, Rusty Griffin being one of them.
Yep.
So the hell with Hartwell. So he started taking parties at the Kiwi, catching the shit out of spotted bass.
Yeah.
And people were happy campers.
And they still do, and it's still got a bunch of. I mean, but I'll tell you, the largemouth population at Kiwi is incredible, and not a lot of people talk about it, but there's some giant bass, largemouth in Kiwi, and especially.
Is it better than Hartwell for largemouth?
Do what? What's that, Wes?
Is it better than Hartwell on largemouth fishing?
It depends. It's all on time of year. You can go up to Kiwi during the summer and catch a 20-pound bag of largemouth. I mean, they're there. They're absolutely there. But it's all dependent on time of year. Kiwis typically better for largemouth during the summer. They get up real shallow. They eat a lot of brim. Out here, usually the bigger bags of largemouth, at least for us, we catch from Black Friday to 1st of March.
So, hey guys, while we're here, I meant to say this earlier in the show. For y'all that believe in God and that pray, Joseph Harrison's daughter was involved in a wreck Friday. I'm not sure what time it was Friday morning. He called me Saturday about 11 o'clock, I think. And his daughter was ejected from a vehicle in the car she was ejected from, fell on her. I talked to him today. She's still in a coma. And his family could use a lot of prayers right now. Drunk drivers. A drunk driver hit them. No use for drunk drivers at all. And I know everybody makes mistakes. I made a whole lot in my life, but when you're drunk driving, you're putting anybody's life at risk that you're liable to come across on the highway. It's not just you. But anyway, if y'all keep his family in your prayers, I know he would very much appreciate it because they need it right now. Scott Perry said, Pete, tell us about Hartwell. Yeah, Pete, what was your thoughts on Hartwell the first time you fished it? I remember the first day you fished it, what me and you talked about, but what did you think about it? Seriously.
I actually enjoyed it. I had a great time. I mean, I'll say this, it might be a 5-minute talk here, but I think the mud kind of helped me because it helped me eliminate a lot of water, going to. And I'll tell you what I did throughout the 2 days of fishing there. The first day we put in there, our house is there at Conross Creek. So we put in there at Conross, we rode up the river. It's kind of marked a few places there. But the first place we fished was right there in front of Clemson. We went under the first bridge. And there was a lot of bait in there, and I put my spread out there and caught fish right away. I mean, it was fast and furious. Caught one nice striper, had a second one smoke us pretty good, come off, and as soon as that happened, we brought our shit in and left. And then we went down to Conross Creek and fished there for a little while and smoked them there pretty good too. Very next day, we went to the other river and caught them pretty good there as well, to include 13.5 pounder. I mean, every day. So we fished Thursday and Friday, and we caught multiple 10-pound fish, and not much over 10 pounds, like 10.2, 10.3, and then that 13.5 we got on Friday. But I enjoyed it. You know, I did talk shit. No, I did not lose a lot of gear. I did not. I lost a few bucktails. I didn't even lose any A-rigs at all. I just lost a few bucktails, maybe a couple jigs. Had one fish break me off. I liked it. It was great. As I say, you know, to a lot of folks, if you can catch fish consistently on Lake Norman, you can catch fish any damn lake in the country. And I really mean that because Hartwell reminded me of Norman big time.
Amen.
Dieter, what are you doing, buddy?
What's up, buddy? I got your request. Sorry it took me so long.
Well, Dieter, you don't know. You know everybody here at Barrett. Barrett's not on right now, but Dieter, this is Warren Turner. Warren, this is Dieter. Dieter,
hey.
Warren's one of our. He's probably one of our ambassadors in striper fishing, as far as trying to protect our fishery and keep them going, and making sure people like me and my grandkids and kids and people years from now might be able to catch a striped bass. So
Dieter is the Warren Turner of catfishing.
yeah, there you go.
What is the addiction to striper fishing?
What's the addiction to catfishing?
What do you think it is? I mean,
I like the quick action. I like the way they attack when they hit a bait and the way they pull and stream a drag. That's my attraction.
It's their streamlined look. It's the birds. It's the fight.
It's the fact you can troll through there and you have 5, 6, 7, 8 fish on at one time.
The different tactics that you can use to catch them. So it's a lot of things like that.
What is it for you, Warren?
I just like the fact that they give everything they have, and that's also why they have a hard time recovering after being caught. A striper will fight you until the lactic acid will build up in them, and they have no energy left. So, just that excitement. I mean,
and they're harder
I
to
was
catch.
hooked first time I caught one. Yeah.
Yeah, they're not easy to catch. I read somewhere that the average striper fisherman only averages 2 fish every 8 hours. I mean, they're not an easy fish to bring over the gunnel for sure.
There's less of them population wise in the lake because they're not a naturally reproducing fish like the catfish is, except for in like 4 or 5 bodies of water in the entire United States.
Mm-hmm.
Now, Barrett, what is your attraction to largemouth? I know that's your favorite fish to catch, correct?
The money.
Oh, you go for the money?
No.
All right,
No,
Pete.
I mean, it's the same thing. It's just.
Go ahead, Barrett.
It's different tactics. I mean, you can catch one from 2 foot to 25 foot. It's just.
Yeah, it gets a little harder when they get offshore, doesn't it, Barrett? Like when, in the spring and everybody's throwing spinner baits up on the bank, everybody can catch fish. When they move off the banks, it's a little bit harder, ain't it?
Well, yeah, and there's always fish on the bank. I'm not an offshore. I'm not a live scoper, whatever, like everybody else is nowadays. I'm kind of brought up a little old school, but and Wes will tell you, I fish for everything. I mean, I like bass fish, but I crappie fish, a striper fish, a carp fish. I do a saltwater fish. I do it all. I mean, it doesn't matter.
Do you own a boat?
Sir?
Do you own a boat?
Yes, sir. I do. I have a.
What kind of boat you
Don't
got?
say so to him. Don't say.
I was going to say, my God, do you owe him money or something?
You are whatever your boat is what you are. So if you got a bass boat, then you're a bass fisher.
Yeah. I got an 18-foot Ranger. I'm a bastard.
All right, Dieter, what's your attraction to catfish? What makes you do catfish?
It's weird. I heard somebody say something about the fish being hard to catch. Catfish, generally speaking, are not hard to catch. You know, in at least until this past weekend when they kicked my butt. But yeah, generally they're readily available to start with. You can find them in pretty much, unlike a striper that's, you know, there's limited reservoirs you can find them in. The other thing is the potential for big fish in a lot of places. Lucky that we have the potential for big fish around here. You got a reasonable chance of catching a 50-pound fish. You don't have that reasonable same expectation with striped bass. There are places where it might happen, but it'll never happen in Lake Norman. It'll never happen in Hart. Well, I don't know. I ain't gonna say never. You know, Clark's Hill, there's a few unicorns that show up, but yeah, they're just not widespread. And you know, that's
what drew me to it was the size. You know, it's one of the biggest fish you can catch in North America, you know, besides like an alligator gar out in Texas or something, you know. The blue catfish is in, you know, a lot of different lakes in the United States, and they grow to epic proportions.
Yep. It's yeah. But I like the striper thing. I like the striper thing. And the reason I asked that question is not a put down of them by any means, because I like to fish for them. I wish I could commit more time to it. But yeah, there is an attraction to it that's kind of hard to quantify and describe what it is about. You know, they can go from being very stripers, I'm speaking of, can go from being very hard to catch to pulling them in one right after another, like you're catching white perch. And that's kind of, I don't know, I think that's where the part of the allure is for me.
Well, you know, if you're going down the road and you see a little Honda Civic with a giant tailpipe on it and the big old wing, and it sounds like a bumblebee, and you're like, what are these guys doing? I don't see the attraction there. Go watch the movie Fast and the Furious and you'll get it. Same way with striper fishing. There's lots of lifestyle videos on YouTube that you can go watch and get a very good you know, you get it wrapped around your head as far as like why people get into that lifestyle. It's
Scott finally showed up there. Oh,
from the surf fishermen. If you look at it like catfish, we're a lot more the same than striper fishermen when it comes to trophy striper fishermen. You have surf fishing guys. They're like in they have their whole little culture. And then you have ocean striper fishermen, bay striper fishermen, lake striper fishermen. You know, you have river and lake striper catfishing, but I think that's your biggest differentiation between the two is the cat is the river and the lake. But striper fishermen, there's a lot of different ways.
Now let me ask you this: what is the big attraction to? And Peter can probably speak to this because he fishes for him some. Crappie fishing. What is the big? Because they're little, they're not exactly an apex predator. They taste good.
Eating all day.
Well, I kind of question that too, because you know, crappie fishing doesn't do it for me. You know how some folks love trout fishing, some folks love drum fishing. None of that does it for me. You know, like striper fishing does. Catfishing does not do it for me either. You know, I'll enjoy going crappie fishing for a time or two here and there. You know, certain times a year. I think for me the biggest draw is crappie fishing in the spring, because that's your chance of getting that possible wall mounter. You know, and my wall mounter is 3 pounds. You know, and so every spring.
Now, where did it come out of Norman?
No, I've never caught a wall mount. I've caught a 215 and a Wiley. That's my biggest one to date. And I told myself if I ever get one 3 pounds or bigger, it's going to the wall.
I caught some 15-inchers Sunday morning. By the way, where were you?
Where was I? What?
Yeah, you were supposed to meet me out there Sunday morning.
Oh, hell no.
I knew you weren't going to make it. I made a video for you out there. I hadn't posted it yet, but yeah, I did good. I caught 16 fish, and they were all good sized fish.
Gotcha. You know, one of my favorite crappie fishing spots on Lake Wiley of all time, this time of year, when the wintertime, I spent all my time fishing right there, that marina by Buster Boy Bridge. You know what I'm talking about?
Yes. Isn't it shallow?
I've won a lot of tournaments fishing that marina all damn day.
You're talking about the one that's straight across from the landing? Yeah.
That was my jam right there. I literally put in a bush boy, went in the marina, and I fished that damn thing all day
Now,
long.
would you sneak and get off onto
No.
it?
Nope.
Yeah, you stayed on your boat.
I'd
So
shoot
you were
pontoon
shooting.
and everything.
You were shooting. Okay.
Yep.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. But give it a try there sometime. It's always hot this time of year.
I've fished that once and I didn't do good, so I haven't been
You
back.
gotta
I need
really
to go.
get up tight to it. That's the thing. You know, if you don't get under the pontoons or in those big boats there in the front, you won't catch them.
Okay. Good to know.
JR, what is it that draws you to catfishing?
Well, you know, I started striper. I became a hardcore fisherman in 2007. Started out striper fishing. You know, I was always a crappie fisherman before then. You know, I was always a meat guy. I loved the crappie, and I would keep catfish. I kept about anything I caught. And then in 2007, started striper fishing. Started going to Tennessee, Georgia, South Carolina. Fishing all the places that all these striper fishermen fish. And I one day around, I guess it was probably around 2011, 12. I saw this guy on YouTube named Dieter Melhorn holding up this big old fish on Lake Wiley. And it was like a 52 pounder. And he caught the fish, brought it in the boat and like held it up for like a tenth of a second and then threw it right back in. And I was like, oh my God, that guy catches so many big fish. It's just no big deal to him. I didn't know there were big fish like that in Wiley. I want to go catch one of those. So I always wanted to go start trying to catch the big catfish, but I couldn't quite get off the stripers. So I ended up staying on the stripers up until around 2016, 17. I started fiddle daddling with catfish, and in 2017, I hit it hard. I mean, I was spending, 12, 14, 16 hours out there at a time. And nothing got my blood pumping like catching a 50+ pound fish. I mean, the stripers were fun, and I caught some big stripers in saltwater, but never really caught any big stripers in freshwater. The biggest freshwater striper that I'd ever caught was only 20 pounds at Loudon. I never got into fishing the Cumberland River, pulling giant skipjack and trout and doing all that stuff. I was just more or less I would fish the river, but I would be within a couple miles of the dam 99% of the time when I fished in Tennessee. But I didn't catch a striper over 20 pounds in freshwater until I went with Drew Rankin. But yeah, there's just nothing like catching a 50-pound fish like a catfish, and doing it just right down the road. So yeah, that's why I began.
JR, let me ask you a question and be serious.
Okay.
What's the biggest striper you've ever caught?
The biggest striper that I've ever caught, and the funny thing is, though, the biggest one I've ever caught was 49 pounds, and it was with US. The thing is I've caught multiple 49. I've caught at least 3 at at 49 pounds. We could never get over that 49 pound mark. So
my question is, you didn't you'd rather catch a 49 pound catfish than you had a 49 pound.
Well, now I had caught big stripers before. I had caught 40 pounders, saltwater.
We'll say 30 pounder. What I'm saying is, fish for fish, you'd rather.
Well, I'll be honest with you.
I'll
be honest with you. If we had a trophy striper fishery, within half an hour from where I live, I would probably have never become a cat fisherman. I would probably still be a striper fisherman.
Yeah, I was about to answer this question for JR. It's, for him, it's quite easy. He can literally back up to the river right there by his house and start catfishing, but you can't striper fish there.
No, and I used to love Lake Norman. I love Lake Norman is my heart. That's my true love. Wiley is nothing compared to Lake Norman as far as my opinion.
Years ago, I've actually caught many striper. I can't say many, but I can
when they had the big striper kill, I gave up on it. Yeah, I'm sorry. When they had the big striper kill on, and they started stocking the hybrids, I was looking forward to the high. I thought they would act like the stripers did. They didn't. It became just a 100%, party fishery, and I don't know. Go ahead, Peter.
I was going to say I've caught many striper on Wiley in years past, right there up against the dam there, Mount Holly.
Dieter caught one a couple years ago. Remember that, Dieter? 17 pounds, I think it was. Wasn't that you?
Yeah, I don't remember how much it was. Yeah, caught it down there at Mills Creek. That's been a long time ago.
Yeah, not that long. Maybe
You can watch
7,
it
8
later
years
once-
ago.
once everything loads
I bet
up.
it's been 10 at least.
Now.
Maybe
Yeah,
so.
every striper I've caught on Lake Wiley has been either up at the dam there or in Catawba Creek.
That's where they end
That's
up at
Catawba Creek
for
that's
some
Mill
reason.
Creek, right?
Mill
It's
Creek's
right
one-
above it.
Yeah.
Isn't Catawba Creek Mill Creek? Isn't that the same creek?
No, they Catawba Creek is 7 Oaks.
Catawba Creek is 7 Oaks. Okay.
Yeah, Mills
knew there
Creek
was-
is the one right below it.
So it's
Okay.
been light years since I've been on Wiley. Maybe I can describe it here to you. But as you go in Catawba Creek, about halfway in before you get to 7 Oaks, you got those big boulders on the right side.
Yep.
There is a little channel right there. And every striper I've caught has been right up against those boulders right there.
You must have been talking about a long time ago.
Long time ago, baby. Early 2000s, yeah.
Do y'all
They used
see
to
this
s-
question on the screen?
Is bow fishing tournaments on Wiley hurting the catfish trophy fishery?
Apparently
could be.
not. If you look at the results from the tournaments, they progressed upwards. It used to be virtually impossible to see a 50-pound fish weighed in on a tournament on Wiley. Now we get them regularly.
Don't bow fishermen primarily shoot flathead catfish? As
Bow
opposed to
fishermen
blues?
shoot anything they can shoot.
Right,
What
but I think
what they bring in is generally carp, catfish.
I think
and
they tend to, when it comes to catfish, I think they tend to get the flatheads more often.
Yeah.
Well,
Scott ain't
Scott,
right.
here you go. Do y'all use sabiki rigs to catch?
We'll let you go,
trout?
Warren. Are you ready to go, Warren?
Yeah, nice to be on. Enjoyed talking with you guys.
Nice meeting you, man. Thanks for stopping by.
All
See you,
right,
Warren.
y'all take care.
Good night,
All right.
buddy.
care.
Warren, we'll talk to you later, buddy.
That's
All
it.
right.
Bye-bye.
So I thought we were going to talk more about the tournament. Huh? Where's Scott at?
He's coming.
So you finished ahead of Scott in the SBC.
It was luck. I mean,
Yeah. How many now? You did well pre-fishing. Did you do
yes,
as well
I smoked
on
him
tournament
pretty
day?
good. That's correct. It was more of it was a gamble for what we did because one little section, and again, I'm not trying to hide creek names because I don't know the damn creek names. I just, pre-fished, found a little like the area. And like I said, man, I was finding, thing I was looking for was colder water. And every place that I found a pocket of 49, 48 degree water, I caught damn good fish. Any place I fished that was 50, 51, 52, nothing but dinks, So my pattern definitely worked up there, no doubt. But every place we fished, we caught a good fish, 8, 9, 10, up to 13 and a half pounds. So what we did on tournament day, I caught a 13 and a half and a 10 and a half in the same stretch of water. And that was basically about it. There was nothing else, no hybrids mixed in. It was a big striper. Again, we caught those 2 fish and we left. So it's not like we sore-mouthed them all. So we went back there and the fish were there. They just weren't feeding. And then we had, it's kind of funny. So let me tell you this funny story, by the way. All right. So we hooked that 13 and a half pound fish, and here comes Daryl Barney right next to us. All right, as we're fighting this damn fish. Net the fish, swing him in the boat, and we yell, "Fucking catfish!" And he's like, "That ain't no fucking catfish," from his boat, So it was kind of funny, you kind of seen that. And, of course, on tournament day, he was fishing there as well as Skipper and a couple others. So we knew we did our homework. I guess we found the right area, but it just wasn't happening that morning. I mean, the fish were there. They were down deep. They just weren't active.
I think we had a little bit of a cold front come in, I think.
Well, yeah, the cold front. But again, I liked that scenario because I like colder weather, the water temperature dropping. It was the back third of a creek. So, I mean, everything scenario was good. Bait was there, everything. Caught a couple of hybrids right off the bat right in there. And after about 2 hours of trolling around, not really picking anything of any size, we took off down the lake to, plan B, caught fish there. Went to another spot, smoked them, caught about 15 or 20 fish in about an hour and a half, trolling around some other guys out there that weren't doing much of any good. And then the last hour, we decided to go right back to where we caught those big fish at. Dude, I kid you not. Last 5 minutes of tournament, damn fish busting on top, schooling, swirling, ran out of time. But they fired off right then and there, which all the boats were gone, all cleared out, but we were there by ourselves, and they fired off their last 5 minutes. So
we got to talk West and Dieter into coming getting that HSBC.
Were any of y'all able to beat Brian Bear, or
We all did. I beat him.
his mom? Okay, good.
No, he brought in one fish only, to my knowledge.
Okay.
Good size.
7 pounds, maybe, I think.
7 pounds.
Yeah.
All
He
right.
didn't have time to get down to Russell to catch a big fish on this trip.
All right. Well, enough about Brian.
No, hey, JR, don't get scared. He ain't gonna sue you. Tell that bitch
I
to
just,
sue you. He knows what
I just
to
don't know why we continue to bring him up. That's all. So, Dieter, you should fish the HSBC, bud.
It seemed like I looked at that one and I'm gone that weekend. That is
February the 4th.
Yeah, well, yeah, I'm pretty sure I'm going that weekend.
Pete, you gonna go offshore with me next weekend?
I'm gonna think about it. I should be
Weather
off.
permitting?
I should be off, weather permitting. Yeah, possibly. Might be good. Might be a good possibility. Yes.
What weekend you going offshore?
Not this coming
Not
weekend,
this
but
one,
next
but
weekend.
next.
Mm.
I should have gone offshore today. Honestly,
He said,
but my dumb ass decided to book some guide
You
trip.
want to go, Dieter?
Oh, there he is.
yeah.
There he is to save me.
Dieter would love to go, Wes. Go with him,
I
Dieter.
would ask Scott, but I know Scott ain't gonna go. He's got too many excuses.
Wes gets to experience one of your videos on his boat, and I'll be kicked to the curb.
Well, I asked you today about going.
We'll make something clear. This right here, when it's empty.
I can't hear nothing. Hold on a second.
Of course not. I'm gonna put this thing on my dang. So I got a little mantle full of plaques and whatever. This right here will go on my mantle once it's empty. Cause I stole that shit from Scott.
Yeah.
Dieter, are you busy next weekend after next?
Yeah, I was just sitting here looking at my calendar on the computer. I need to figure out when this stuff is in advance and quit putting stuff on top of these weekends. My weekends let's go do something the weekend of the 11th and 12th.
That's the Murray tournament.
Oh, is it?
Yeah.
Let's go fish it, West or Peter or somebody take me. Anybody but JR. I don't want to go to JR. I want to have at least a legitimate shot at.
I don't know that much about Murray. If Scott
I
would
know.
go,
I've never been on Murray either. So yeah.
if he wants to. You want to do that, Scott?
All right, I'm gonna play this back because I'm gonna go. If you go, I'm gonna go, and I'm gonna do better than whatever boat you're on. And I'm gonna. Oh man.
Do we have another bet? Do we have a bet?
Oh yeah, you better.
Do we have a
get
bet?
some Pappy Van Winkle or something.
Okay.
Now, who's doing the tournament on Murray? Is it part of the SBC thing?
Yeah.
I thought you had to be in that trail to fish it.
No, you can fish any tournament on that trail, can't you?
Scott, you want to fish out with it, Murray?
Don't ask Scott. Take me.
No, I meant with you too. I just don't know that much about Murray. Like Scott knows Murray like he does Hartwell.
I think Peter would do well on Murray because Murray's a lot like Hartwell and Norman. It's a lot of creeks.
Peter.
Hartwell, I have never fished Murray. Never.
Murray, there's no trees in Murray, Pete. You would do awesome there.
Peter would
Be good there.
He would do very well on Murray, I believe.
Scott, you want to fish it?
No. Not with you or Dieter.
Wow. Wow. That hurt.
Scott, you want to jump on my boat and fish artificial? I said, hell no.
I need some.
Scott has no hesitation. He's just an asshole. Scott calls me. He says I'm an asshole with a. He calls me a tender-hearted asshole. Scott's just an asshole.
No, not really. I'm nice guy.
I can't say no. If you ask Scott something and he doesn't want to do it, he immediately says no. Not me. I beat around the bush.
That'll get you in trouble with Wes. You don't beat around the bush with Wes. Your ass is signed up.
Yeah.
All right, so I'm gonna leave the 11th open if one of y'all decides to do this. I would love to film something.
I was thinking about fishing that tournament. I'm off that Saturday, but I worked 12 hours that Friday, and that whole week before is a long week. So I mean, it's just like this SBC. I mean, it kills me pre-fishing. I hate fishing a tournament without knowing where the fish are at.
Right. Like anything else, if you want to do it, you want to do it right.
Yeah, but I'll let y'all know if I
Just let me
decide.
know. I'll put air tags on 3 or 4 boats down there at the ramp, and we'll figure out where everybody's fishing at.
I haven't really thought much about it, but I mean, it would be a good tournament. Murray fishes pretty good in the wintertime.
Nobody has a more of a grass is greener mentality than fishermen. It's like what Dieter just said. He'll put air tags on people's boat. Anybody I ever go fishing with, and I'm talking about some good fishermen. Hey, Brian Snipes did it when we were at Santee. It's everybody is. He said, "Wonder where everybody's at. I wonder where this boat's at. I wonder where everybody's fishing." When I'm fishing, I used to be like that. Now I'm like they should be. Even though I don't do well, I'm still like, hey. They should be worried about where JR's at. I'm not worried about. I don't care where they're at. They need to be worried about where I'm at.
I think it's more or less like if you fished a lot that week, you don't care. But the stripers, man, they could be in a creek on a Friday, and Sunday they can be 10 miles away in a creek. I mean, it's hard to stay on top of them.
Wes didn't ask me the question, why I like striper fishing, and that's exactly it, because no 2 days the same. Like, you whack them one day, one creek, in the evening, you go back the next morning, gone. Dead sea, barren of life, everything. So you got to start all over and reassess and find them.
It's kind of a guessing game. Like, I mean, I guess wrong in this tournament, but you look at the weather pattern, you look at what happened, and you kind of make the best judgment for what you think. Like Hartwell, I misjudged the rain. Like, it didn't blow out the creeks, the major creeks. It blew out the little creeks. Major creeks were still fishable. That's where that should have been. But what I did was I went down to basically the main river split where there was cut throughs and there was a lot of bait, and I knew it was going to be clear water. But like Peter, I heard him say earlier, I know everybody says I was on fish, but I mean, you can see the fish in the trees. You can see the fish on top of the trees. They weren't feeding. They weren't. I actually moved 3 times during that tournament. I went down the lake, and that's where that picture they posted of my boat was when I ran down the lake and looked around. And I'm no expert, but I had a feeling that the afternoon bite was going to be fire, better than the morning bite.
So I actually found a very good afternoon bite between, I'd say, 12 and 2, I think. There's 12 or 1:30. We found them chewing right there in the mouth of Hurricane Creek in the damn mud. I mean, it wasn't muddy. It wasn't bad muddy, but the visibility was, 5-6 foot, but we had, what's his name? Benji was there and Barney was there, and they were fishing around. They weren't doing too good. I mean, dude, I kid you not, we didn't get our 3rd rod out and we got smoked already. So by the time I got my entire spread, we had 3 fish in the boat that quick trolling around them, and they really weren't doing too much. At least they weren't admitting to doing much at all.
Y'all were in 6 and 20.
I'd say within an hour and a half, we probably got 20 fish, but they were all. We did get one upgrade in there, which is that 5-pound even striper. It had another one that's 4.5, not quite make the cut. But
I think
they definitely fired up there, and then they shut down just that quick too.
I think with the muddy water, the reaction bite's going to be better, along with the cut bait bite. Which I know a couple boats that cut bait, and they did what everybody else did. They brought a couple 6-7 pounders to the scale.
Should have used chicken livers.
But
mussels would have been the trick.
That's right. Yeah.
That was Wiley Saturday morning. You can see how muddy.
Mm-hmm.
That's right there in front of Allen's steam station, Dieter.
But my thought on the tournament was, like, I only pre-fished the week before, so I had limited. I knew where the fish were that Peter fished, and I knew there was fish down the lake. And my thought, without seeing the lake, was down the lake was going to be less affected by the rain, which in turn, I think there was only a couple boats that really got on fish that day. Like, really, most of the fish, everybody I know struggled to get some keepers in the boat, and we went across a point. It was like 40-foot point, and there was fish stacked, and that's when we caught that little turd fish. And it was about 1 o'clock. I knew I could have reeled the boards in probably and spot locked and caught another little turd. But I was thinking with the pressure dropping that my best chance of at the tournament was to keep pulling the gizzard shad and hoping that bite came on before I had to put the boat on the trailer.
Yeah. Yep. So I can't even name where I actually fished, but pre-fishing I found, and looking back at it, I wish that I would have gone in front of Clemson instead for the tournament, because we caught a couple good fish there. But I was so worried that the mud would have moved in there, and it actually did not. But we were already all in with fishing where we're at. What's that ramp called there? Wes, what's that ramp called I told you we used?
Fair play.
12 mile.
Oh, 12 mile.
No, not 12 mile.
Fair play.
Is it Fair Play where the bridge is at,
Yeah.
the 85 bridge?
Yeah,
Oh,
number
Glenn's Ferry.
exit 2.
Glenn's Ferry.
Yeah, there you go. Okay, Fair Play.
Exit 2, yeah.
Yeah.
That's actually where that
Boy, that's
picture
the
of
state
me and
park, Scott.
Thomas Walker's boat, that was Fair Play ramp.
Oh, was it? I got you. I got you.
Lake Wiley was pretty muddy, like I just showed you the video, but upriver it wasn't. I mean, it was dirty, but it wasn't muddy like that. And all your debris was south. We went up. I actually showed up at Buster Boyd at around 4:00 that morning, and Jamie Williams was there. Jamie K Outdoors, and he said, "JR, I'm going up river. I'm going Hero or Zero." And I had already put my boat in the water, had it tied to the dock. I was waiting on Brian to get there. And the way this tournament trail works now, you can put in any ramp you want. And I sat there, and I've been trying to learn the South Carolina side of Wiley, not good on it at all. And I said, you know what, man, you're going to North Carolina, you're going up river, I'm going with you. So I went and put my boat back on the trailer and trailered all the way to Dale's, which was another, 30 minutes away, and put in there, went on up beyond 85, anchored up, had all 10 of my rods out, had all my bait cut. I mean, I had giant gizzard shad. I stayed up all night catching bait, throwing that net. I was wet, I was sore, I was tired. Had a tank full of giant gizzards, a tank full of big perch. I even had some crappie in there in case I fished North Carolina. And anchored up, had just pristine cut bait on every rod except 2. I had little small pieces on 2 rods. Went to sleep. As soon as 6:30 hit, lines in, I cast them out. I went to sleep. I laid down on the floor of the boat, went to sleep. I woke up over 3 hours later and I had 2 fish on, and they were both little 5 to 7 pounders, and threw them in the bait tank in case I needed them. Got everything in, and I went downriver, down past almost to South Point, and I trolled down there for a little while and ended up leaving early. I was so tired and so frustrated. I ended up leaving around 12:30, went back to Buster Boy waiting on the weigh in because I had to film the weigh in. So I crawled in the back seat of my truck and went to sleep all the way until 3:00. So
I know you guys are talking about tournaments and why we like tournaments, and this week kind of reminded me, it's like the whole week you're like stressed out looking at maps, like trying to make the right decision. I mean, all that goes into it, not the ego of winning it, but you're working hard, you're looking at maps. I mean, it's just, I like the whole thing about it. It kind of fired me up a little bit. That's why I might fish Murray.
I like the whole thing where everyone's talking shit 2 weeks prior, making fun of each other, side bets, this and that, and the day before and that way, and everyone's all buddies again.
That was a great weigh-in. I mean, everybody had fun. That was They do it right too. They wait. I mean, they pull the boat up, pull the fish out. Somebody was saying, "Damn, it was 2-hour weigh-in," but then I calculated it was 80 boats weighed in fish in 2 hours. It was like 1.1 minute and 1.5 minutes per boat. That's pretty good. Mm-hmm. That's pumping them in and out. That's pretty good.
I think that, and I saw one like this. I've always wondered why the catfish industry didn't do this, tournament industry, and where the boat, just like in bass fishing, where the boat pulls up and the guy, takes the fish out and they weigh it right there. And that way you can keep it in the live well all the way up until time to weigh in instead of using totes or whatever.
The bigger tournaments are doing that.
Yeah. If there is room at whatever ramp you're having,
you got to have a special ramp. You can't go to just a regular ramp. And we're lucky. We got Green Pond, which is a shitty ramp, but it's great for tournaments. But most, like every other ramp on Hartwell, we couldn't have done that. Like they're parking for maybe 50 boats and 2 lanes, and
Yeah.
But yeah, it was. I love being able to drive your boat up, keep your fishing alive, up, pull it out, throw it in the bag, weigh it, go right to the DNR. They measure it, throw it in the tank. I think that's a lot of the reason their main tournaments on Hartwell, that and the support they get from the city.
Are those striper tournaments kill tournaments, or do they have to be alive?
They're all live release.
I think we lost. There was 100. I might be off by a couple. It was like 146 fish weighed in, 3 dead.
Do you get points deducted or something if
10%? 10%.
Okay.
Peters was probably dead. He was keeping his in a crappy.
All 5 pounds of them, right?
Yeah, I don't think
It's
Peter.
funny, but Peter pulled up. I'm like, Peter, don't drop it. Peter, don't drop your fish. No, it was funny.
I think Peter keeps in his stock boat live well, don't you, Peter?
That's right. Yeah. I mean, it does pretty well in the colder months. You know, there's no doubt about it. In the summertime, they would not.
None of them.
If I turn that damn pump off, they would not. Made sure that switch is flipped and it stayed on the whole entire time once the fish were in there. But again, I had hybrids in there. I had a pair of hybrids in there for virtually the entire day, and they're a lot more hardier. And I was able to upgrade with a striper with about an hour and a half prior to weigh-in. So, you know, keep them alive is no problem.
What's funny is the stripers, they'll float upside down in the bait tank.
Yeah.
But like as soon as you touch them, they're wide open.
Crappie do that, and I was wondering why they do that. Do you think it has anything to do with their bladder? You know how you can take the pin and like DNR does in the tank after weigh-in, how they'll puncture the bladder and release the air so they can get back down.
I don't think so this time of year. I think it's just more like, I mean, they're trapped. So that's kind of like their defense mechanism. They just kind of, I mean, you try to grab a hold of one, they're gone. But
absolutely.
Yeah. I'll tell you a funny story since I put it on my Facebook, but I told Heather, I said, you can drive the truck and I'll get in the boat, or you can get in the boat and I'll drive the truck. And she's like, what do I got to do? I said, well, they'll bring you a bag, throw the bait net over the fish's head, grab it by the tail, drop it in the bag, hand it to the guy. That's all you got to do. Get out of the boat. So they were selling barbecue before the weigh-in. They had a table set up for barbecue. She tells me this later. I don't see it. I'm driving the truck, but they bring her the bag. So she thinks it's time to weigh in the fish. So she puts the fish in the bag and tries to hand it to the barbecue guys. They're like, darling, what you doing? She's like, you weighing these fish? She's like, no, darling, you ain't up there yet. You better put the bag of tape for nice.
That's hilarious.
Oh, butterfly.
I was hoping she was going to get in the boat because I didn't want to pull that little dink turd fish out of the bait tank.
So, Dieter, what video ideas? What are you thinking for if you were to get on the boat with one of these guys in the tournament on Murray? What would your video? How would it go?
I don't know. It depends who I fish with. There's got to be a story there. That I'd have to figure out. I don't know what the real story is with any of these characters. So.
If he fishes with me, it'll be more of a lifestyle story.
Yeah, I mean, it's going to be
kind of like Billy, but better.
Yeah. I mean, it's going to be that kind of stuff. It's when you said Billy, I was thinking of Billy 2 out there. There's Billy.
I think you're talking about Billy Davis.
Yeah, that was a good video.
No, I think there could be some cool stuff. It's nice when you're just. I'm gonna go film something in the next couple of weeks, whether it be stripers or catfish or whatever the heck, something that's just filming. So yeah, I think that would be cool though. If any of y'all go and have room, let me know.
Well, these guys have fished with me in a tournament, Dieter, so probably I wouldn't be great on video during a tournament.
Yeah.
I'll be honest with you, I might not be great either, but I'll see what I can
have
do.
your hands full. But Dieter's used to that.
I mean, and Cody with me, so more than likely.
It'd be better than I'll tell you what's funny is to get on YouTube and watch the video of Dieter on Bo Rice's boat.
I was the old one from way back when. Yeah.
Talking about Bo Rice from Tennessee?
Yeah.
Oh, hell, how did that go over?
That was back before I even had I think I shot that before I actually had a channel. I just had a YouTube space. Yeah, that was eons ago. God, what year was that? 2000?
Yeah, I don't know. It was, I don't know, probably 10 years ago.
At least 10. Yeah.
At least,
somebody on here named Close Enough Fab and Racing said you were the only real fisherman on here, so you got a stalker. Maybe you could take Close Enough Fab fishing or Close Enough Racing Fab, whatever.
Hell, Wes, JR, and Dieter beat me in the tournament, and they didn't even fish. So how can I be the best fisherman out
Dieter, if you want a story, you better go with Scott Perry.
Well, Wes is going to be the easiest to get a video with. You're going to have to work a little with Scott. I mean, Scott will work with you, but you have to coax him. And
damn, JR, I let you run a drone into the trees when we were fishing.
Oh yeah.
How the heck? What kind of more work? I had to hunt
I'm just saying, with Wes, it's extremely easy because Wes he makes it easy because he doesn't shut up. He just constantly talks. So
you're right about that.
It's pretty easy to get. Yeah, you just turn the camera on and just get a bunch of footage and take what you want. With Scott, you actually have to like ask him questions and stuff. Yeah, the camera comes on and Scott doesn't talk.
You say that. Yeah, I like to talk. You let that motherfucker get about 3 good shots of that down McKenna Creek in, and you can't shut him the fuck up.
No. Yeah. Dry January for me, bud.
No, I'm talking about Scott Perry.
Oh, Scott Perry.
Lies.
I don't drink during tournaments, Wes. It's all business.
No, he's very serious, Dieter. He's mean. He'll scold you.
I'll tell you to shut the fuck up.
Yeah, he's mean. He's not very nice.
That's good audio. I like it.
I told my partner to hang up the fucking phone a couple times on Saturday. But he knew what I was coming from, so you know.
I just said I thought we were here to have fun. I said we'd have fun after the damn tournament.
Hey, Walker and Perry's fun to fish with in a tournament.
Yeah, I've never seen anyone work like this, Dieter. These guys, here's how it went. I fished the SBC with Scott and Wes and Mike last year, and Scott is up on the graph, and he's using he's on the trolling motor, and he's looking at the graph. He's sitting in the captain's chair, and he knows where all the lines are just by looking at the graph. So he's like, reel this front one up, reel this back one up. And if you try to talk to him, he'll look at you with these like dazed eyes, like he's not even thinking about you. He's thinking about what he's going to tell Mike. And yeah, it's pretty intense. He's telling you where to put as you're putting the bait down. If you engage the reel and go to put it in the rod holder, he's like, no, put it, go further, go deeper, reel it up. Reel it down, reel it up, let line out. It's just constantly work.
And that's a tournament you're struggling to. Like, I mean, a good tournament, you're not doing that. That was.
You seen what I did? I anchored up and went to sleep. That's how I fished the tournament.
And that's why you got you zeroed. You skunks.
No, I caught 3 fish. If I had went to the weigh-in, I would have only weighed in 15 pounds at the most.
I'm still trying to figure out why it took you all night to catch bait on Wiley when that stuff was stacked up at the Seven Oaks Bridge. The most bait I've ever seen stacked up in there.
I had been going and catching bait in Evans Creek. Well, I shouldn't be telling where I'm catching bait. I've been going catching bait in 2 or 3 different places on sabiki rigs with little tip.
You're talking about catching perch.
I was catching perch that way. I was doing very well.
Don't tell anybody you were catching perch down there at the Fort Split in Evans Creek because that's a secret. Nobody knows where that's.
And then I went a couple days before the tournament. I couldn't catch I couldn't find them. I was like, oh my God, what am I going to do for freaking bait? So
I thought, did you throw a net any?
That's what I did. I actually, instead of going to Wiley, I could have caught bait on Wiley, but going to Norman is the easy button for me. So I went ahead and
catch gizzard, Chad?
I drove the extra distance, yes, and I threw the net all night, and then I stopped at this little marina and hopped off and caught some crappie, and so I had a tank full of. You couldn't have asked for better bait. I guarantee you I had better bait than anybody in the tournament, and wasted it.
I
Dina
mean,
would be great at videoing Pay Lake or cart tournaments. I honestly, that's you're exactly right. I think there is a reality show that could be done around cart Pay Lakes. I think there are enough characters in that world, and I think there's enough drama and enough I don't give a shit
100.
that Cart Lake there's a true reality show that can be done.
Damn, Peter just cussed.
Yep.
Huge potential there.
Save the video. Dieter cussing.
Oh, did you think I was a priest or something?
My two most successful videos, Dieter, are carp fishing, and I only have 2 videos of carp fishing on my channel. They blow all my other videos away.
Yep.
People, there's a lot of potential there. I mean, you could really
absolutely.
That's a niche that someone can get in and have a lot of success for sure.
And you know why? It ain't the fishing; it's the fucking drama.
Exactly. It is the drama in that world. Yeah. Absolutely.
A lot of secrecy. A lot of secrecy. People want to watch because they're thinking they're going to find out someone's secret recipe to their bait.
Jay, I agree. Great bait wins tournaments, but you need to spend a lot of. I mean, if you on the fish,
it's not like that in catfish, Scott. It's not like that in catfish. You don't. I would
rather spend more of my time finding the fish than I would throwing a cast net for pristine bait when I only have 2 hours to fish. I mean,
I don't look for fish.
Okay.
Dieter fish tournaments, a lot more than I have. Dieter, do you go out and mark fish? Is that the fish you're targeting? Fish that you've marked?
Depends. Not necessarily fish. Hey, Pete, did you fish that certain creek because you thought it was a great spot, or because you marked life, bait, and fish in that creek?
We're talking about 2 different species here, though.
And fish.
When I striper fished, that's why I went out and bought a HDS and spent $1,500 on a graph, because I had to mark fish because I was a striper fisherman. I'm not a striper fisherman.
Catfish eat bait too, yeah.
The spots I had, the 3 places I fished had a lot of micro orgasms all built in one area there, so it was pretty good.
Catfish you can't mark as easily as striper. Striper are always they're not. They're not on a channel ledge, hugged up against a channel ledge. When I'm catfishing, if I'm pulling boards, I'm fishing the top of the ledge, middle of the ledge.
But you don't want life on that ledge. I mean, you don't want some kind of life, you don't want to look at your screen and just see a desert, do
perch. Yeah, if I'm going to go mark fish, I want to mark perch.
I mean, yeah,
I do that. I
mean, 90% of fishing is being in the right location, not having the right bait.
Yeah. Yep. You go get in some tournaments and you don't do well, and all of a sudden, obviously, you can't fish, and everybody wants to give you advice, and everybody's, hey, bud, I want to take you under the wing. I don't need to be taken under anybody's wing. I can catch
too much time with bait. The biggest striper I ever caught on Hartwell was on a herring. My partner reeled into the boat, and it was flat, it was sideways, and it was kicking us down. He's like, screw it, it's still moving. He put it out, and we caught we caught a 40-pound striper on Hartwell, which is.
Tournaments are luck.
Winning a tournament comes down to luck.
Winning a tournament is luck.
Yeah, there's some skill built in, skill.
Oh, no.
Why do we have the same group of people fishing in the top 20, finishing in the top? Like if you're in a tournament series, you'll have the same group in the top 10, 15, almost every tournament. That ain't luck.
No, let me finish what I'm saying. I've said this before. Winning comes down to luck. You've got to have everything else in place. The reason you got those same top 20 all the time is because they've all got the same skill set. They've all got the ability to win. They're doing everything that's right. They got to have a lucky day for it.
But y'all make it sound like Bubba can just get in his 14-foot John boat and float it out from the dock, and he can. He can.
I mean, it's possible, but not consistently.
His percentage is not going to be up there.
Exactly. Consistently, no. When you've got a tournament like you guys were fishing, that striper tournament, there's a lot of good fishermen out there that have caught big fish, won tournaments before. It comes down to who got lucky that day and did the right thing in the right place at the right time. Because there ain't nobody out there. You don't see any of these guys coming back and going, man, we just went out there and did everything stupid and wrong today. We were skimming our our rigs across the top of the water, and that just wasn't working. Everybody,
yeah, the top 10 probably is luck. The top 10, but you can't just say it's all luck. It's not all luck.
But are you?
No, it's not. I've
considering
never said it's all luck. I said winning a tournament comes down when you've got a lot of people with a lot of skill. Listen, when I used to fish these little catfish tournaments down here that one of the tackle places put on, and there were 8 or 10 people, half of them were drunk 2 hours into the tournament and they were throwing out chicken liver. I was able to beat them on poor skill. When you go out with the Southeastern Catfish Club, there's a ton of good people in there, just like with
you can't beat those guys. They're all
you don't just
good.
you got to be
So
good at a lot of stuff to win that.
I think there's too much emphasis on equipment, and I mean, I don't think it's being in the right place is at the right time is what
absolutely.
Yeah.
And that's what there's a lot of luck plays into that, because there's a lot of places in a finite amount of time. You can only cover and fish so many places. Exactly. And some luck has to fall in your favor.
You also have to consider, Scott, is you have the same 20 people. If it's an 80 to 100 boat tournament, you have the same 20 boats that are getting in that trail every single tournament, every time they have it.
I just think the top tournament fishermen are not necessarily the best fishermen, but they're the ones that put in the most work.
Yeah,
and
they're the ones that got the drive.
I agree. Just less so than catfish versus stringer.
Dean, from Thursday to Saturday, everything was caught on artificial. There's no live bait allowed on my boat.
Y'all were talking about luck. Scott, you'll know this name that I'm fixing to mention. Dieter, I'm sure you won't. Peter may, I doubt it. JR, you probably won't. But my daddy did heat and air conditioning too. And years ago, back when I didn't even fish, I can remember a few of these conversations. My daddy was friends with a man named Gene Lotto. And we were do you know Gene, or do you know of him, Scott?
Yeah, I know Gene. I fished tournaments against him.
Well, I remember him, and my daddy used to fish a little bit. He wasn't that big at it, but I remember him, and we were at Sun Heating, which used to be downtown Greenville. And Gene walked over to the truck, and Gene didn't really talk to a lot of people. He was kind of standoffish to a certain point. But, him and my daddy was friends because my daddy wasn't that big in fishing. They was friends on the heating and air level and a professional level as far as what they did for a living. But, I remember, and my daddy said, Gene, how do you catch all these big fish year after year? And you know what he said? And I don't know if catfishermen do it or not. He said, the most important thing to me when I get on my boat is my notes. He took notes of everything. He took notes of water temperature, what day it was, what time of the year it was, how deep he was fishing, what bait he was using, every time he caught a fish for years, he wrote it down. What time?
I think a lot of us do that. I did it. I'm sure Dieter.
He said the most important thing to him as far as his arsenal was his notes.
Now we don't have to do that anymore, especially guys like me and Dieter and Scott that upload videos to YouTube. All we got to do is go back and look at the video.
Well, see, that's another reason why I upload a lot of photos, because I'll go back on my photos and I know that roughly this day.
Yeah, gone are the days where you have to actually fill up a notebook.
Yeah, but in your photo, do you know what? In your photo, do you know what the water temperature was, how deep you was fishing, what you caught that fish on?
All you got to do is Google it.
I think what that plays a role, because lightning don't strike twice. You're probably not going to go back to the same spot in the same conditions and catch fish. But what it does, it narrows down that 56,000 acres to about 2,000 acres. I mean, you know where the fish are supposed to be at.
I don't know about y'all's lakes. I know Lake Norman, you can find out what the water temp was any day, in the past, 10 years. If you want to know what the water temp was and all that data is online.
Yeah, the water temperature in the winter, I mean, unless it's in if it's in the 50s, I don't think it matters. But I mean, there's I haven't figured out these stripers, but it's like let's take that tournament, for example. There were some boats that caught 20 fish. There was many people I talked to at the weigh-in that struggled to get 2 bites on the same body of water. So at a certain area of that body of water, the fish were feeding, and another area they were not feeding.
Dieter froze up. Now he disappeared.
Yeah.
I don't know, Peter. I don't know how many fish you caught tournament. How many fish did you catch tournament day?
Me, about 20.
Yeah. So see, you had a very good reaction bite that day. But like the live bait bite,
I'd say 15 of those, or I'd say about 13, 14 of those came in that 1.5 hour window afternoon.
right? That that pressure dropped right at lunchtime. That's my thing was I was running the lake probably more than I should have, but I ran down and up because I wanted to be on fish at noon, at lunchtime, because I figured it was either going to come right at lines in the water, because lines in the water, I was in 10 foot of water way in the back of a creek with big gizzard shad, hoping to get that one bite. And then as the day moved on, I moved out to deeper water. Then I ran down the lake and didn't see what I liked. Then I ran back up the lake and I found fish in the trees. And I was telling Heather, I just want to be on fish from 11 to 3. I want to have fish under the boat, because I thought that's when the bite was going to come. It never came, but that's when.
It's weird how one portion of the lake they'll fire off and the one does not.
And the same body of water is crazy.
Yeah, exactly.
Let me ask y'all this.
They definitely fired off right there in the mouth of Hurricane Creek, and it was only me, Barney, and Benji. I think that was it. And you should have heard the damn shit talk between all 3 boats. Benji was like, "We just released a 15-pounder," and I was like, "Is that all?"
Let me ask y'all a question. And there again, and I know Crappie's really bad about this, but what do you think makes these fish, they won't bite all day, and all of a sudden, boom, they just turn on, and when they turn on, all of them turn on? What causes this? Is it the fish following one fish and say, "Hey, this motherfucker's eating"?
It could be a combination of a whole bunch of things, honestly. Could be pressure change, cloud cover, a school of bait fish moving through, as well.
I think this is just my guess. I think stripers feed twice a day. I think they feed hard twice a day, and I think when you got a full moon, you're losing one of them feeding windows, because I think it's going to be at night. So I think there's a window during the day, during a full moon, that you get, and that's what I was hoping for. I was thinking it was going to be around lunchtime. And I think when they're Peter can probably verify that. I don't know, he pulls artificial, but when them fish are in them trees and they're just sitting there, it's hard to get them to eat, man. You almost got to hit them in the head with it.
My method that I approach right away, the moment we drop hooks in the water on day one, is everything I fished was above the trees. So I marked trees at about 20. I think the tops were maybe, we'll use Conross Creek, for example. The water's down 6, 8 foot, whatever it was. So I think the deepest I set my downrigger in 3 days of fishing was set at 20. And I actually was still not comfortable with 20. And oftentimes I brought up to about 17 or 18. And that seemed to be the zone where they chewed. I caught a lot of downrigger fish. And every single one was right at about the 17, 18 foot. It tells me that I was skimming the top of trees.
Mm-hmm. And they were reacting. You were pulling them out of the top of the trees for the reaction bait, which that's one thing you lose with live bait fishing, because they can look at a live bait. They can come up, look at it. They can decide. With a artificial, they got to make a decision. Am I going to eat this or am I going to let it go?
That's why you can get away with the wire.
Every time on both days, not on day 3 tournament day, but every time on Thursday and Friday, when I marked a solid group of fish, 3, 4, 5 fish at that 10 and 20 foot range, we caught fish. Every time like clockwork. There you are, boom, 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 3 on one time. So it was like clockwork. And on tournament day, there was never those damn marks, except that window of time I was telling you about between, let's say, 12 and 1:30.
One group of guys that caught fish, they pulled live bait all morning. They caught 2 small fish. They threw on some umbrella rigs and they proceeded to catch 15 fish in coal. I think the umbrellas
like we talked about
outfish
last week. The artificial are going to outproduce live bait.
Yeah, but the top 5 boats in the tournament were live bait fishermen.
Right. I didn't say quality. I said quantity.
But when you fish in a $20,000 tournament,
You want quality.
Hero or zero.
I mean, it definitely, the live bait bite was way off. Like most guys that fish live bait weighed in 1-2 fish and didn't cull, and most of the A-rig guys were catching 15, 20 fish.
I ain't gonna lie, I was quite disappointed on Saturday because, like I said, on Thursday, our 2 biggest fish weighed right at about 21 pounds. On Friday, our 2 biggest fish were touching 24 pounds and 2 fish. It's pretty damn good, we thought, So we thought for sure, with what we saw, what we're doing, we were going to bring in at least, playing conservative, at least 17, 18 pounds. We thought for sure that was the bar that we're going to bring in. And we failed bad, but, the bite was not there.
That full moon killed it. Everybody knew it was going to. I mean, it wasn't the weather. It wasn't the cold front. It was the full moon.
Absolutely,
them fish fed at night.
Yep.
I got a question. I just thought about this. I'm changing the subject, but not meaning to get on this. There's no hybrid in Murray. Is that correct? Is it just strictly striper?
Oh, never caught a hybrid Murray. That's why they can have their regulations they do.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. But they stock it like it's a hybrid lake. They stock 1 million or 2 million fingerlings a year in Murray. It's insane.
But if you don't, that's what Warren was talking about. You can't put regulations on a hybrid striper lake because the hybrid would just take over. I mean, to get a 25-inch hybrid, I mean, they're in their last year of life.
You run the risk of a fish kill too with that many fish.
Yeah, I mean, you can't do it. You can limit. I mean, if you're putting hybrid in a lake, you're pretty much turning it into a party lake.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I thought that's what Murray was.
I mean, Murray, for some reason, they have quality fish, but they rarely grow big fish. I don't have a reason for that.
It's got a little bit to do with the liberal limits and also the fact that they're stocking so many, and it's a huge put and take fishery.
I think the issue with Murray is all the damn guides. Like everyone's a damn guide on Murray, and you got guys doing morning, afternoon, evening trips. One after the other in the summertime.
I mean, I had a Murray trip in tournament in March, and I mean, we've caught 30 fish, and it was a 3-fish weigh-in. We've caught over 30 fish and only had 2 keepers. I mean, it's like the fish get to like 19 or 20 inches, and
just let me ask you this. Again, I've never ever even been on Murray. What's your size class of fish there?
20-inch.
Murray, and I think Murray's probably got an average 8-pounder. They got some 20s. I've seen 30s, but their average is about an 8-pound fish. And I mean, it's a great fishery.
The size limit's 21 inches on Murray, and
yes.
If you go catch 10 fish on Murray, at least half of them will be 19 inches, 19 and a half, 20 inches. They'll be right there at that keeper size, but they're fun. It's fun. And the chances of getting skunked are lot less than any other lake because there's so many in there.
I do think Murray has there is a lot of guides on Murray. There's a lot of fish taken out of Murray.
I mean, there's a guy that sells bait on his boat on Murray. There's a guy out there with a 500-gallon tank on his Carolina skiff. You can pull up to him. Yeah, you can pull up to him. He'll be around the ramp sometimes. Sometimes there's no telling where he'll be. You just pull up to him and say, "Hey, man, you got 3 dozen herring?" Yeah, so 3 dozen herring right there on the damn lake, right there from his boat.
But I mean, that's what it's made for, guides. I mean, it's a dream lake. I can go out and limit out by 9:30 and be back.
You can go fish the humps. You can go up river and you can fish the fork. You can go on up the rivers and have more of a river, type fishing experience. You can go down to the towers. And you can fish 180 feet of water, and you can have a thermocline bite with blasting rock and roll and having lights out.
You can cut bait anywhere and pull A-rigs anywhere. There's Murray's a desert. There's no trees. If you get hung up at Murray, you tried.
Damn.
I guess you could get hung up on those humps on the big pool or in the rivers.
You bounce over humps.
All right, guys, I'm out of here. I enjoyed it. Thanks for the invite, Wes.
You're welcome,
Okay,
buddy.
Are you back here next Tuesday?
Yeah.
Yeah, every Tuesday, buddy.
I'll try to keep an open evening. See y'all.
I'm blocking
buddy.
them, Peter, so I will be.
Good night, buddy.
So I don't even know if I'm gonna do Murray yet for sure because of my work schedule. Actually, I am scheduled to work those days, but people are fighting over the flights that I have scheduled. They're like, I'll take these, but you do these. So I think I'll be able to swap out of them. So
Yeah.
I think you'd have a blast at Murray. The only problem, and probably people get mad at me on here. Murray is winter time. The fish really move upriver. Like
yeah, I already know it's gonna be a river thing for
Yeah.
sure. That much I do know.
JR, I'm just thinking I can't fish Murray in my boat anyway. I don't have a bait. I got a bait tank. I got a bait tank out there in the building, but I ain't putting no bait tank in my boat and mounting it and putting screws in it and all that shit to fish a regular ass hybrid
Putting
tournament.
screws in it. You don't have to do all that. I don't do that.
How you gonna keep it down?
Put it on a pad or. it'll
Hey
just
Wes,
sit in the
I
floor.
got a $300 tournament bag I'm gonna give you.
Wes, you don't
I
have to have
think so.
anything. It'll set in the floor. It's not going to slide around or anything.
Got like a 6 foot long insulated bag I'm gonna give you. It's a saltwater bag offshore.
Yeah.
I don't use it, so you can have it.
Speaking of offshore, West, I realized, as I was going through the tackle shops there at Hartwell, that one tackle shop there near that little shad place that everyone buys shad at, it's got saltwater stuff there, man. Walk in there and get you some damn cedar plugs.
Mm.
I got cedar plugs. I got probably 12 of them.
Yeah, you got that shit on freaking Amazon, freaking shop local, man. Come on.
No, I got those. I got those cedar plugs at
Ocean City.
You know, go out of Little River. If you go out of Little River, go out of my marina, take a right.
Oh, the Merle's Inlet place.
Yeah, I got you. Well, I'm just saying though, that tackle shop there actually it shocked me. It had a wire and freaking cedar plugs and some other random
Peter,
stuff.
did you go to Lake Hartwell Outdoor Center while you were there?
Yeah.
That's some pretty amazing live bait system they got in it.
It was, yeah.
Yeah.
I asked for permission to walk through it and throw some bleach in those tanks for.
It's the best one I've ever seen.
It didn't work, but
Well, listen, don't tell me how to spend my money, homeboy. I don't tell you how to spend yours.
All right, Shorty.
All right,
All right,
guys.
guys, I'm gonna get off because I have to
Been a
get
good
up in the
show.
morning for another guy.
Yeah, we'll go ahead and end it. We'll end it together.
All right.
Good night, guys.
Scott,
Thanks for
Scott already
stopping
ended
by.
it. Or did he fall out and pass out?
He probably went to get a spittoon.
There he is.
There he is. We're saying good night, Scott.
Guy.
You want to sign us out, Scott?
Thanks for watching Real Fisherman. See you next Tuesday.
Woo, woo. No.
Good night. Oh. What did you think about that liquor, Pete? Did you like it?
Yeah, it's like same as anything else.
Whatever.
Like a tin cup.
Hold on. How did GR say? It's got that little smoky flavor, that's smooth and a little sweet.
Damn,
smoky
JR
and
made us sound like we were from California or something.
You would think you're in wine country listening to him. Oh my God. Right?
Hey, guys, that's a very good bourbon. It's got a smoky flavor.
It's not like I put a lot of time into that. I just thought about it and did
We
it.
know that. You didn't put much time at all into it.
All that JR said all that tin cup was some bougie booze for him.
Shit. So I was thinking about this. I'm like, you know what? What if I just want to randomly take a shot right now? I have no fucking tin cup on top. So, I mean, what am I going to just top and just drink it?
Tin cup. Tin cup was very good, but it's more of a Tennessee whiskey. It's very much like a Gentleman Jack type. No, that's
bottled in bond, baby. That right there, that's better.
That's a bourbon, JR. And
well, 10 cups of what is that? A mountain whiskey? Is that what it's
It's
called?
more of a blend. It's a blend.
But it could be
good.
a blended and still be a bourbon as long as it's been aged for 4 years.
It's got to be made in Kentucky to be a bourbon.
No, it does not. Oh my God!
Yes,
How much
it
you want
does.
to bet on that?
Google it.
I don't have to Google it.
I bet you
already know.
I bet you that Catch the Fever hat against
Bourbon.
my favorite hat.
Okay.
To be considered,
ship me your favorite hat in a box
to
tomorrow
be
because
considered
it's
a
mine
straight
now.
bourbon, it has to be
No, it doesn't.
distilled in Kentucky.
No, it does
I
not.
did the bourbon trail.
Jack
in,
Daniels is
Louisville.
technically a bourbon.
Jack Daniels is a whiskey. It's
Jack Daniels
filtered.
a bourbon is whiskey.
No, whiskey is filtered.
Most brands are produced in Kentucky, where bourbon production has strong historical association. What's that prove, Wes? That's not proving anything.
Trust me, JR. Just trust me one time in your life.
It's like me telling you that striped
One
bass
time
aren't
in
in the
your
Marone
life.
family. You know that they are in the Marone family. You know it to be a fact, and that's what I know about bourbon. I know that it doesn't have to be
hold
distilled
on,
in.
JR, hold on. Read this real close before I take it down.
Okay, bourbon can be made anywhere, but it cannot be labeled as bourbon unless it's made in the state of Kentucky. As
Thank
Jack
you.
Daniel's Fire
Send me
Mash
the
Whiskey.
hat. Send me the hat. I want the hat.
Just because it can't be called bourbon doesn't mean it's not bourbon.
What are you
Bourbon
talking
can
about?
be made in any state in the United States.
I did the bourbon trail there in Louisville, Kentucky, some time ago.
Yeah, that's good.
Video coming, Scott. Video coming. I'm going to smash you.
Now I
I'm listening
understand.
to Pete.
I understand why people walk around with fucking pretzels around their neck. Damn. She'll fuck you.
Yeah,
up
let's
quick.
see how Google
Did
works.
you did you do the Jim
Bourbon could be
Beam?
made in any
Yeah.
state in the United
That
States.
was a good one, wasn't it? For
It's
like
pretty
$10.
good.
That was a good
Yep.
one.
Oh yeah.
Oh, look, read that out. Read that out loud, Wes. Read that first link out loud right there. What does that say?
I can't
we're
see
just
it.
gonna-
It's blurry.
We're just gonna pull up Google.
What does that say?
I can't read
Bourbon
it. Can you
doesn't
read it?
bourbon doesn't have to be made in Kentucky.
But
But-
it's not real bourbon if it's not made in Kentucky.
Yes, it is.
It's not
No,
real
it
bourbon.
isn't.
It has
No,
to
it
be.
isn't.
It has to be aged in an oak barrel for 4
No.
years to be considered
No.
straight bourbon.
All right,
JR,
make it
I
bigger.
knew that.
And then when you
I
move,
knew that.
All right.
I
Send
knew
us
that as a kid.
Video coming. Good night, guys. Thanks for watching. See you next week.
Peace.
Peace.